Hey guys, tonight we're travelling way back, like pack your own mammoth snacks back. We're dialing the clock 10,000 years into the past. And let me tell you straight up, you probably won't survive this. Not unless you're really into foraging, wild animal dodging, and occasionally praying your mud hut doesn't flood. It's the tail end of the last ice age, and the planet is, well, let's call it in transition. Giant glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising, and humanity is just trying to figure out if the weird new weather means it's okay to unpack the fur coats for good. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fun to know where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes and breathe in air that smells like wet earth and wood smoke. There's a faint mist curling above the ground, remnants of snowmelt now steaming under a morning sun that's warmer than it used to be. The Ice Age is ending, slowly but relentlessly. For millennia, glaciers had covered huge swaths of the earth like frozen white blankets. But now, those icy titans are pulling back, revealing land that hasn't seen sunlight in tens of thousands of years. It's around 8,000 BCE, give or take. And the global temperature is rising, not gradually, but in sudden pulses. One year it's bone-cracking cold, the next it's warm enough to melt your snow shelter. Rivers are shifting, entire ecosystems are migrating. Mammoths, once the hairy landlords of the north, are growing scarce. And the humans? They're on the move too, tracking herds, settling near new water sources, trying not to get washed away in a glacial flood, or impaled by a grumpy aurochs. You trudge through muddy tundra, boots made from stitched animal hide, and spy a band of hunter-gatherers setting up camp. Their tools are flint, obsidian, bone, surprisingly sharp, surprisingly effective. They have built a rough shelter from mammoth ribs and woven grass, but it's the fire in the centre that draws your attention. Fire is still magic to them. It warms, it cooks, it protects, and in this age of unpredictable weather, it's become as essential as water and food. The land is changing so fast it feels alive. Forests are creeping into former plains, grasslands stretch into what used to be icy wilderness. And with this shift, animals change too. You watch as new species move in, deer, boar, smaller game that's easier to hunt but offers less meat. Some humans are still chasing reindeer herds across great open spaces, but others are noticing a curious pattern. Seeds dropped at a campsite seem to sprout the next year. Wild grain is getting easier to find in the same spots. It's not farming yet, but you can see the wheels beginning to turn. As night falls, you sit by the fire with the group. They pass around roasted roots and dried berries, and someone shares a tale of the great ice spirit that once ruled the world. You realise they're not just surviving, they're making meaning from the chaos around them. The stars still hang like frost above you, and somewhere nearby a wolf howls, not yet a pet, not yet a threat, just another actor on the shifting stage. And here's a wild thought. 10,000 years ago, sea levels were over 100 feet lower than they are today. Entire coastlines looked nothing like what you know now. You could walk from Siberia to Alaska across a land bridge called Beringia. You could cross from Britain to mainland Europe without getting your feet wet. But that's all the ending. As the ice melts, the seas rise. Every few decades, another patch of homeland disappears underwater. Some groups migrate inland. Others build temporary fishing villages along the new coasts. One day, much of this will be drowned forever, preserved only in legends or under 20 feet of sediment. Now here's the quirky part. Some researchers believe that sudden bursts of meltwater from retreating glaciers caused massive floods, like biblical-level floods, that inspired ancient flood myths across multiple cultures. Imagine a valley where your people have lived for generations, suddenly vanishing beneath a roaring wall of water. Is it any wonder the survivors told stories? And yet, scholars still debate whether this dramatic warming was a smooth transition or a volatile seesaw of extremes. The Younger Dryas, a brief snapback into glacial chill around 10 to 800 BCE, adds a twist. Some theorize that a comet impact triggered this cold relapse. Others blame disruptions in ocean currents. Either way, the Ice Age tried one last time to stage a comeback, and failed. By your time, 10,000 years ago, it's game over for the glaciers, and the Earth is settling into the warmer Holocene epoch, the one we still live in today. You lie back under a skin blanket, the stars glinting above. You've eaten, You're warmer, and tomorrow you'll follow the river farther south, maybe toward a valley where the food grows easier. There are no nations, no borders, no written languages, just humans, fire, instinct, and the first whispers of what might come next. The next morning comes early, too early honestly, and you're greeted by birdsong, chilly mist, and the low grumbling of someone trying to start the fire again with damp wood. You rise from your animal skin bed, stretch sore muscles, and glance around. This isn't just a camp anymore. There's something subtly different here. Tents are more permanent, fire pits have stone rings, and there's a layout, rough but intentional. People aren't just passing through, they're staying. And that changes everything. You wander into the heart of one of the earliest human villages. Not a grand city, not even a town, but a small communal cluster of people who've decided to stick to one place for more than just a hunting season. Welcome to the dawn of settled life. It's not exactly luxury living, but it's the beginning of everything, from neighbourhoods to HOA complaints. You notice how different the air feels here. Warmer, denser with smoke, sharper with the scent of human life. Someone's skin's tanning in the sun, children are dragging sticks through the dust, and you can just barely hear the thump-thump of a mortar grinding grain in the distance. In places like Jericho and Çatalhöyük, yes, these real-life places existed even back then, people are beginning to build with purpose. You see the beginnings of rectangular walls, entrances built above to protect from animals, and clay-coated surfaces that scream early home improvement projects. It's a huge shift from the wander and hunt lifestyle. Settling down means security, sure, but also a whole new list of headaches. Like, who's in charge of the water source? How do you handle trash? And what if that one family always steals the good firewood? But even with the friction, something about this new rhythm works. You watch people share meals, patch roofs together, chase off the occasional wild boar. They're crafting a new kind of social code, one not based on kinship alone, but on proximity, on shared survival inside a defined space. Somewhere between gossip and grain grinding, a woman walks past you holding a bundle of reeds. She's weaving a basket while walking expertly, like it's second nature. That's the thing about this period. Innovation isn't always fire and flint. Sometimes it's the quiet brilliance of figuring out how to store seeds, carry water, or make a sling that won't snap under pressure. And suddenly that little reed basket becomes the difference between surviving the dry season and going hungry. You're also beginning to notice animals, goats mostly, lurking at the edge of camp. Not hunted, not wild, just tolerated, encouraged even. They eat the trash, they leave behind, well, fertilizer. A few of them seem unnervingly tame. You're watching the first glimmers of domestication, that long, awkward relationship between humans and animals that's still going strong. Dogs have already carved out a role, lounging near the fires, ears twitching, catching scraps, occasionally earning their keep by warning of intruders or chasing off predators. They're not exactly pets yet, but they've stopped being strangers. And here's your historical fact of the night. Jericho, one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on Earth, already has walls by this time. Walls. That means someone decided this place was valuable enough to defend. The walls aren't massive, but they're symbolic. Proof that humans are beginning to think in terms of territory, protection, maybe even ownership. It's less about fighting off armies, and more about keeping animals out and your people in. Still, it plants a seed. What's quirky about these early villages is how much they challenge our assumptions. We tend to imagine life got immediately better once humans stopped wandering. Spoiler, it didn't. Settled life came with a rise in disease, diet problems, and even interpersonal stress. You're suddenly living cheek to cheek with people you used to only see once a season. Hygiene, not a priority. Privacy, not a concept. And rats, those charming, disease-carrying party crashers, are starting to notice human food stores. But here's the kicker. There's a scholarly debate that still makes historians argue politely over conference buffets. What came first, farming or villages? Some believe that agriculture led to settlements, but others argue it was the desire to live in communities that pushed humans to start cultivating reliable food sources. It's the classic chicken or seed dilemma. Whichever side you fall on, one thing's clear. By now, humans are adapting faster than ever before. You can almost feel the gears turning. You duck into one of the huts, low, dark, smelling of clay and wood smoke. The inside walls are coated with lime plaster, and there's a sunken fire pit ringed with stones. Baskets line the edges, some filled with dried berries, others with chunks of meat hanging from simple racks. A figurine, small, stylized, and possibly religious, rests in a niche near the entrance. It's oddly calming in here. No tech, no metal, no clocks. Just you, the flicker of firelight, and a growing sense that this, somehow, is the start of everything. Outside, the sun is climbing. People are beginning to gather. Some kneeling around a half-dug trench. They are building something, maybe a larger shelter, maybe a shared oven. The community functions not because of a leader barking orders, but because everyone pitches in, guided by tradition, by necessity, and by the ancient knowledge passed from parent to child. It's quiet here, but not stagnant. There's movement, growth, and something else, ambition. You sense it in the careful layout of huts, in the way tools are stored for reuse, in how children are taught to handle the flint without cutting themselves. These people are shaping a way of life that'll outlive them. So you sit back on a smooth, sun-warmed rock and take in the scene. A village, still fragile, still figuring things out, but it's a seed. And like all seeds, it only needs time and a bit of luck to grow into something astonishing. The sky the next day is streaked with high clouds, glowing peach and gold in the morning light. And you can already hear the rustle of movement from the village. No alarms, no schedules, but everyone seems to know it's time to get to work. You step out and notice something strange along the edge of the settlement. Rows. Not trees, not natural underbrush, but neat rows of green sprouting from the earth, like someone told nature to organise itself. And just like that, you realise you're staring at the start of agriculture. It's a small plot, barely the size of a basketball court, but the people here are watching it like hawks. The sprouts are wild ancestors of wheat and barley, spindly and less plump than the stuff you'd recognise. But this is where your loaf of bread really begins. Someone, at some point, noticed that the seeds they dropped last season grew right back where they fell. That wasn't just luck, it was a revelation. And here, 10,000 years ago, you're watching the human brain turn observation into revolution. You kneel beside one of the women tending the plot. She's pulling up weeds with fingers already blistered, her eyes scanning the stalks like a mother watching over her children. The idea is simple: plant it, grow it, harvest it. But the execution? It's trial and error, sunburns and failures, and more than a few evenings spent wondering if hunting was just easier. Still, the people here are starting to figure it out. They're not planting randomly anymore. They've noticed which seeds grow better, which plots need less water, which grains store best through the winter. Every season, the process refines itself, and gradually food security becomes less of a gamble and more of a craft. The farming lifestyle is slow, patient, and deeply physical. You follow the process, digging with shoulder blades, using sharpened sticks to break up soil, carrying water from a nearby stream. The soil here in the Fertile Crescent is rich but demanding. Crops don't just grow, you have to battle pests, droughts, and the occasional goat that thinks your carefully planted field is a personal buffet. Still, there's magic in the rhythm. People rise with the sun, share tools, and trade advice. They store seeds in clay jars, marking them with symbols that may be early hints of language. You begin to see how agriculture isn't just about food, it's about memory, it's about keeping track of seasons, recording patterns, passing down knowledge that grows deeper roots every year. And you see the shift in the bodies, too. These are no longer just hunters with lean muscles and quick reflexes. Farming builds different strength, shoulders from carrying water, legs from hours of crouching, hands calloused from constant toil. There's also a shift in the community dynamic. The best hunters once led by necessity. Now, the person who knows when to plant becomes just as valuable. Influence is starting to spread out. Not just who can kill the biggest animal, but who can feed everyone through winter. Here's your historical nugget of truth. Einkorn wheat, one of the very first domesticated grains, is already making the rounds. It's hardy, adaptable, and slowly replacing its wild cousins. This isn't just a footnote, it's the genetic ancestor of much of the wheat we eat today. You're watching the first ripple in a long agricultural lineage that'll eventually stretch all the way to supermarket bread aisles. And here's your quirky bonus. Some archaeologists believe that beer may have been one of the earliest byproducts of grain cultivation. Not bread, beer. Fermented grain mush that accidentally got someone a little wobbly, and then sparked the collective realization that the weird fizzy stuff made long nights around the fire a bit more interesting. It's hard to say for sure, but if early humans stumbled on alcohol this soon, you can bet they made room for it in the agricultural plan. Now, the scholarly debate sneaks in here again. Was agriculture the best idea humans ever had, or the beginning of our collective downfall? Some argue that farming locked us into a more rigid, grueling lifestyle, made us more dependent on weather, and introduced new health problems from a grain-heavy diet. Others say it allowed us to build cities, store surplus food, and invent civilization itself. As usual, the truth probably sits somewhere in the messy middle. You walk through the fields as evening settles in. The stalks rustle like whispers. It's peaceful, but there's pressure here too. A bad harvest could mean hunger. A sudden frost could undo months of work, and yet they keep planting, keep trying, because farming, even now, is about belief. Belief that something small, buried, and nearly invisible will become enough to feed a family, maybe even a whole village. At dinner, you join a shared meal around a low fire, roasted tubers, dried meat, and a dense, almost bitter bread made from their earliest grain stores. It's not delicious, but it's solid, reliable, and that's what they're after. You watch a father show his son how to clean grain from chaff using the wind. Nearby, two women argue over where to plant next season. Even now, politics begins to form in the furrows of farmland. The stars rise over a newly planted field. It's quiet, except for the crackling fire and the soft snore of someone who spent all day in the sun. You look at the tilled earth, still damp with effort, and realise something big. This is no longer just survival, it's stewardship. The land is no longer a backdrop, it's becoming a partner, a battleground, and eventually a home. By now, you've settled into the slow rhythm of village life. Wake, work, rest, repeat. But one morning, as you follow a trail of flattened grass leading beyond the wheat fields, something shifts. You hear a faint bleating sound, high-pitched and oddly endearing. And then, there they are. A cluster of goats nibbling lazily at scrubby plants, watched over by a lanky teen with a sling in one hand and a glazed, bored expression in his eyes. Welcome to the next great leap, the domestication of animals. At first glance, it doesn't look all that impressive. These aren't cows yet. They're not packed into tidy barns or being milked on a schedule. They're dusty, skittish, and more than a little rude, but they're not wild either. They don't bolt at the sight of people. They respond to herding, and you notice a few where simple ropes around their necks, makeshift leashes, maybe even early collars. Somehow, in a very short span of time, humans have convinced a few animals to stop running and start cooperating. Domestication isn't accidental, but it is experimental. The people here have figured out that not all wild animals are equally terrible at sharing space. Some are more docile, more social, and crucially more forgiving of the noisy, chaotic presence of humans. Goats are early favourites. They're tough, eat almost anything, and offer meat, milk, hide, and even fertiliser. In return, they get protection from predators and eventually a steady food source. It's not friendship exactly, it's more like a cautious, codependent roommate situation. But goats aren't alone. You're also seeing pigs beginning to hover near camps, rooting through refuse piles. And sheep, smaller, scruffier than modern ones, are quietly creeping into the domestic circle. It's a slow process, full of trial error, and probably a few gored villagers, but over generations the wild edge of these animals starts to dull. You hear a story by the fire that night about a boy who raised an orphaned fawn, and how it followed him everywhere until it wandered into a cooking pit. The storyteller laughs, but there's an edge to it, a half-serious moral about the blurry line between pet and food. That tension exists everywhere. Animals are useful, yes, but also alive. Also unpredictable. And this early human-animal relationship is complicated from the beginning. Then there are the dogs. Dogs aren't exactly new at this point. They've already been through a couple thousand years of evolution alongside humans. But now, as the villages stabilise and life becomes less mobile, dogs are moving from camp followers to genuine household members. You see one curled beside a doorway, twitching in sleep. Another trots behind a hunter, not leashed, just loyal. They're smaller than wolves, less wary, and more tuned to human cues. You whistle softly, and one lifts its head. Dogs started this journey as scavengers, picking through the leftovers of human campsites. But over time, the ones that were less aggressive, less prone to snapping or stealing, were allowed to stick around. That's selective breeding, even if no one wrote it down. Now some are guards, or some are hunting partners, some are just companions, sleeping close on cold nights. You see a child resting against one like it's a living pillow. You wonder if they know yet just how permanent this partnership will become. A strange fact drifts into your mind. Like smoke from a neighbouring fire, genetic evidence shows that dog domestication may have occurred before agriculture, before pottery, before settled villages. Dogs may have been humanity's first domesticated species, possibly as far back as 15,000 years ago. That means people were bonding with animals long before they figured out how to grow crops or build walls. Emotion came before economics, at least in this case. But it's not all furry cuddles and animal husbandry bliss. You watch a man struggle with a stubborn goat that refuses to stay tied. Later, a piglet escapes and causes complete chaos, knocking over water jars and stealing a dried fish before anyone can catch it. Domestication is slow, frustrating, and full of compromise. Some animals never quite adapt. Others prove to be more trouble than they're worth. And yet the humans keep trying. There's a quiet revolution happening here, one you wouldn't notice if you only looked at tools or buildings. This is the moment when humans begin to reshape the world, not just with stone and fire, but with biology. They're altering the course of animal evolution, slowly breeding species that depend on people as much as people depend on them. And it doesn't stop with goats and dogs. In a few centuries they'll move on to cattle, chickens, donkeys and more. But right now the experiments are small, local, and mostly fueled by intuition. As you return to the village at dusk, you pass a pen made of stacked branches. Inside are 3 sheep, bleating miserably but not trying to escape. A boy throws in a handful of hay and they key settle. You pause. That enclosure, humble as it is, marks a tectonic shift. These animals no longer belong to the wilderness. They belong to the human world now, and the human world is growing. One of the more fascinating scholarly debates centres around how domestication really began. Was it driven by scarcity? A desperate need to secure food sources during unpredictable climate shifts? Or was it convenience? Did humans simply find it easier to keep animals nearby rather than chase them across miles of open plains? Some even suggest that the animals domesticated us, that dogs in particular evolved to read human emotions so well that they essentially trained us to keep them fed and loved. The truth is probably a swirling mix of necessity, accident, and mutual benefit. But standing here, watching a child share a piece of flatbread with a panting dog, you feel something ancient click into place. This isn't just practical, it's personal. The connection between humans and animals is emotional, spiritual, and deeply embedded in what it means to live side by side. Later, as the stars emerge and the last light flickers in the central fire pit, a goat nuzzles your hand. It smells terrible, but its eyes are soft and curious. Somewhere in the distance, a pack of wolves howls from the hills. Not every animal wants a seat at the hearth, but for the ones that do, a new chapter is starting, and it's one that never quite ends. You wake to silence, no clatter of grinding stones, no shouts from herders wrangling stubborn goats, no babies wailing from the clay houses. Just a vast, eerie hush broken only by the soft shuffle of your own feet as you walk toward the horizon. The fields are behind you now. The sun hangs low, catching the stone of something massive in the distance. You blink. No, that's not natural. Those aren't boulders. That's architecture. Ancient, mysterious, and completely impossible by everything you've learnt so far. Welcome to Göbekli Tepe. It rises like a forgotten memory. Circles of towering T-shaped pillars arranged with careful precision, each carved with animals, symbols, and strange humanoid forms. These monoliths, some weighing more than 20 tons, were erected by people who had no wheels, no metal tools, and hadn't even figured out pottery yet. And yet, here it is, right in front of you, not a village, not a temple into the modern sense. More like a monument to a very different kind of thinking. You step into the centre of one of the enclosures and tilt your head back. The pillars tower above, worn smooth by time but still standing defiantly. You run your hand along one, cool stone carved in high relief with foxes, vultures, wild boars. Not decorative, symbolic. But symbolic of what? Nobody knew it. That's part of the mystery. Here's your historical gem. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BCE, which means it predates the Great Pyramids by over 7,000 years. It's older than Stonehenge, older than the wheel, yet it shows a level of architectural planning, labour coordination, and symbolic thought that's deeply out of sync with how we imagine primitive humans. This place shouldn't exist. And yet here you are, standing in its shadow. The people who built Göbekli Tepe weren't farmers. Not yet. They were still mostly hunter-gatherers, living in small mobile groups, which makes this place even more shocking. How do you coordinate dozens, maybe hundreds of people to haul massive stones from nearby quarries, carve detailed imagery into them, and arrange them in complex geometric patterns, without a centralized government or even a proper village? One theory is that Göbekli Tepe was a ritual center, a sacred gathering place where scattered bands came together seasonally to perform ceremonies. It might have been a place to honour the dead, initiate young hunters, or make offerings to animal spirits. Another theory, that this site itself sparked the development of agriculture nearby, that the need to feed labourers working on these stone circles led people to settle, plant crops, and eventually build villages. In other words, religion may have come before farming. Yeah, that flips everything on its head. As you walk from circle to circle, the complexity becomes more obvious. Some pillars are arranged to mirror the constellations. Others seem to reference death. Scorpions, vultures, headless human forms. You sit on a fallen rock and try to imagine what this looked like in its prime. Fires blazing in large basins, drums echoing off stone, chants rising under the stars. A surreal blend of sweat, awe, and shared human need for meaning. And here's the quirky side note. Despite its grandeur, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE. Yeah. Covered over by its own creators, preserved beneath layers of backfill, like someone said, "Okay, we're done here," and then entombed it. We're still not sure why. Was it abandoned for spiritual reasons? Was a new belief system taking hold? Or were they simply done with it, the way a culture moves on from an old capital or sacred grove? Even today, only a small fraction of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. The rest lies under the ground, guarded by time and bureaucracy, but what's visible is enough to unsettle all kinds of neat chronological ideas about human progress. It forces a tough question. Are we underestimating how spiritual, artistic, and organised humans were before farming, before cities, before writing? As the sun dips behind the hills, casting the stones in long shadows, you notice something else. There are no signs of permanent habitation nearby. No food pits, no houses, no graves. This wasn't a home, it was a destination. And that makes it even more incredible. People chose to come here, to work here, to build something that outlasted their lives. That's not just practical, that's visionary. Scholars still argue, often loudly, about Göbekli Tepe's true purpose. Was it the first temple, a giant tribal meeting ground, a celestial calendar, an artistic expression of fear and power? No one agrees, and that's okay, that's part of its mystique. But whatever it was, it marks a tipping point. A moment where human consciousness stretched outward, beyond the immediate needs of food and shelter, and asked, what if we built something to last? You run your fingers along a weathered carving of a lion. Its eyes are hollowed by time, but its mouth still curls into a snarl. Did the people who made this believe the lion's spirit lived in the stone? Was it meant to ward off danger, or to attract it? As night falls, the pillars cast eerie silhouettes under the stars. You're struck by the feeling that you've walked into someone else's dream, and you don't entirely want to wake up. Before you leave, you turn one last time to look at the vast stone circle behind you. It doesn't speak, it doesn't move, but somehow it knows you are here. And if stones can remember, then maybe we haven't changed as much as we think. We still carve meaning into hard places. We still gather. We still dream bigger than we can explain. The dirt beneath your feet is soft and warm now, the kind of soil that clings to your soles and leaves tracks long after you've passed. You've wandered southeast of Göbekli Tepe, following a winding path along a gently sloping valley. The land here is generous, green, alive, humming quietly with insects and birdsong. Somewhere in the distance you hear the trickle of a small stream. This is the Fertile Crescent, and if there's such a thing as civilization's hometown, you've just walked into it. You arrive at a cluster of homes built low into the land, roofs flat and sun-baked, walls made of tightly packed mud brick. It's not flashy, but it's solid, deliberate, and definitely lived in. These people are past the trial phase. Agriculture is no longer an experiment. It's a full-time lifestyle. You step inside one of the homes and smell the earthy scent of damp clay and drying herbs. Everything has a place. Food stores are kept high and dry in pottery jars, tools are hung carefully, and a fire smoulders in a pit lined with stones. It feels like a home, ancient sure, but familiar in a way that brushes oddly close to modern. This region, what we now call the Fertile Crescent, stretches across parts of modern Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Lebanon and Israel. Back in 10,000 BCE, this was the ultimate real estate. Rivers like the Tigris and Euphrates meandered lazily through the land, bringing floods that refreshed the soil every season. The land was a jackpot of biodiversity, wild grains, lentils, figs, and nuts growing freely, and animals just waiting to be domesticated. If only someone was determined or stubborn enough to try. You wander through the village and notice the people are organised, not just surviving but thinking long term. Some are weaving fibres into the cloth, others are repairing storage bins or reshaping stone blades. A woman is teaching a child how to scatter seeds in neat, tidy rows. There's no shouting, no frantic scrambling, just steady work, and the rhythm of a life where time now moves in seasons instead of migrations. The fascinating thing? These people probably don't think of themselves as the first farmers. They're not trying to invent a new way of life, they're just adapting to a land that offers enough predictability to stop wandering. One good harvest leads to a second, and soon enough there's a house, then two, then a village. The change isn't a thunderclap, it's a slow drip. But over time, it adds up to something world-altering. Here's your historical fact for the night. The village of Sayenu, not far from here, shows evidence of stone buildings, communal food preparation areas, and even the earliest known public buildings as early as 9200 BCE. That's not just shelter anymore, that's shared infrastructure, collective identity. It hints at governance, cooperation, maybe even early forms of leadership, or at least someone yelling, "I told you we needed a bigger oven." And the quirky twist? In one building, archaeologists found evidence of floor stains consistent with ritual bloodletting, possibly sacrifices. It's always like this, isn't it? The moment humans settle down and figure out plumbing, they also invent mysterious religious practices that involve cutting something open. You can't have civilization without a little drama. One of the major debates among scholars is just how central this region was to the global spread of agriculture. Was the Fertile Crescent the origin, the single spark that lit the fire? Or were other regions, like China's Yellow River or Mesoamerica's highlands, also cooking up their own domestication revolutions around the same time? The evidence leans both ways. The Fertile Crescent has the oldest large-scale farming sites we've found so far, but that doesn't mean it was alone. Humanity has always had a knack for reinventing the wheel in parallel. Back in the village, you're invited to share a meal. Flatbread cooked on a hot stone, a mash of legumes, dried figs, and something that might generously be called cheese. It's dense, a little bland, but filling. More importantly, it's predictable. And in a world where uncertainty once ruled every decision, predictability is luxury. You sit with the others in a circle watching the way they eat together, pass food, share jokes. Their lives are harder than yours by any modern standard, but they're not miserable. They've made a system that works, mostly. You're shown the village's water source, an ingenious little irrigation channel, carved by hand, fed from the nearby stream. It's not fancy, but it gets the job done, redirecting water toward the crops just enough to stretch the season. Someone figured this out not by theory, but by years of watching, learning, adjusting. That's what this place is made of, not grand inventions, but thousands of small, quiet solutions to daily problems. And that's how societies are born. In one corner of the village, a small patch of reeds has been turned into a weaving station. A teenage girl with quick hands is making something that could be a mat, or a basket, or maybe just practice. You sit beside her and realise, knowledge here isn't hoarded, it's passed along early and often. The kids aren't just playing, they're learning to survive, and in the process, helping civilization gain another foothold. By evening, you're lying on a rooftop wrapped in a thin wool blanket, watching smoke drift up from hearths across the village. Stars dot the sky in familiar constellations, though no one's given them names yet. You hear laughter from one house, a goat braying in another. Someone's baby cries, then is soothed. It's all so human, so timeless, and yet beneath the surface, a massive change is brewing. Villages like this will soon cluster into networks. Tools will evolve, beliefs will solidify, grain will become power. You're not just watching people settle down, you're watching them gear up for the next great transformation. Culture, hierarchy, history. But for now, the village sleeps, the fields rest, and so do you. Morning in the village arrives not with alarm clocks, but with the low murmurs of conversation and the soft rhythmic thump of tools at work. You hear it before you even open your eyes. The dull clack of stone on stone, the whisper of blades scraping across wood, and the occasional sharp crack as something breaks and someone groans in frustration. Tools. You can almost smell the flint dust in the air. It's time to get your hands dirty, because this morning you're going to see what it takes to turn rocks and sticks into civilization's first real hardware store. You head toward a small outcropping just beyond the edge of the village. A group of people, men, women, even a few kids, are crouched over the ground, working with a methodical focus that borders on meditative. They're not just breaking rocks, they're shaping them. Flint, obsidian, chert, each type with its own quirks and personality. You pick up a piece of obsidian and nearly slice your thumb. It's sharper than a modern surgical scalpel, and yes, that's been tested. Even now you can see why it was a prized material. One man motions you over, and you squat beside him. With a hammerstone in one hand and a chunk of flint in the other, he gives a few controlled taps. Chips fall away in a practiced pattern, revealing a razor-edged blade with a gently curved tip. You blink. It's elegant. This isn't random smashing, it's geometry. It's physics. It's art, honestly. Over the next hour, you watch the workshop unfold like a dance. People are making blades, scrapers as arrowheads, and sickles. Some are carving wood handles to fit snugly to the stone, binding them with twisted sinew and resin made from boiled tree sap. These aren't disposable tools. They're crafted to last, maintained with care, passed down through families like precious heirlooms. A flint sickle that cuts grain cleaner means more food, less waste, and fewer arguments at harvest. Here's a neat historical fact for your collection. Around 10,000 years ago, humans began embedding microliths, small razor-sharp blades, into wooden handles to create composite tools. Think of it like the Swiss Army knife of the Neolithic. A sickle wasn't just a piece of stone, it was a dozen tiny blades set into a curved slot, each replaceable, each a little miracle of early engineering. And then there's obsidian. You see it being traded hand to hand, people examining it under the sun for cracks and quality. It's dark, glassy, and glints with a dangerous beauty. What makes it special isn't just the sharpness, it's the way it travels. This stuff doesn't come from just anywhere. It comes from specific volcanic sources, which means if someone in this village has it, it's either been carried dozens, maybe hundreds of miles, or traded from group to group across vast distances. Obsidian isn't just a tool, it's currency, status, even diplomacy. But not all tools are about cutting and slicing. As you step away from the flint knappers, you find a quieter group working on grinding stones. Huge slabs of sandstone hollowed from years of repeated use. They're making handheld querns and mortars, used to crush grain into flour, nuts into paste, pigments into powder. The movement is hypnotic, round and round, back and forth, hour after hour. You try it, it's exhausting. Your shoulders scream after 5 minutes. These people do it for hours every day. And that brings us to the quirky moment of the day. Evidence has been found of ancient left-handed grinding patterns in these early tools. That's right, your Neolithic ancestors were ambidextrously inclined. Lefties, finally getting some archaeological love. It's a small detail, but it hints at the individuality behind the grind, literally. Even in a world without written language, people left marks that spoke volumes. As you watch a woman sharpen a blade to prepare for a hunt, a quiet debate flickers in your mind, one that archaeologists still wrestle with. Did new tools create the need for new behaviours? Or did new behaviours demand better tools? It's a kind of chicken and hand axe situation. Some argue that the development of agriculture required the invention of tools like the sickle. Others suggest that it was the tools, sharp, durable, efficient, that allowed people to think differently about their food, their land, their future. Either way, the truth is likely tangled, like sinew around a blade. By midday, the air is thick with dust and sunlight. Children run past with wooden sticks, pretending to be hunters. One trips and lands near a flint chip, picks it up and instinctively throws it at his friend. It misses. Everyone laughs. You smile too, because even now, in this rough early chapter of human life, some things are timeless. Children turning tools into toys and accidents into games. You duck into a nearby shelter where more refined tools are laid out like a primitive showroom. Bone needles, antler picks, polished stone axes. Someone is even experimenting with carving bone into fish hooks, carefully tying sinew around the tip. It's easy to forget that these early humans were inventors, not just survivors. They weren't content with whatever the land gave them. They shaped it, chipped it, ground it down until it bent to their will. There's something deeply human about this workshop. Not just in the tools, but in the way everyone's hands are involved. Craftsmanship isn't specialised yet. Everyone's a maker. Tools are survival, but they're also status, storytelling and pride. You watch a young man show off a blade he made himself. His father nods, and it's like he's just graduated. That night, back around the fire, someone passes around a knife with a bone handle carved into the shape of a fish. It's ceremonial, maybe lucky, or maybe just personal flair. You realise that even now humans are leaving behind more than just function. They're leaving beauty, style, a signature in stone. The stars blink overhead, and you can almost hear the distant echo of what's coming. Metal, bronze, iron, but for now you're surrounded by the sharp, clever silence of stone. It cuts, it scrapes, it speaks, and in these hands it changes everything. It's just past dawn when you find yourself wandering into the shadows of a low limestone overhang. The air is cool here, still and damp, with the scent of old dust and moss thick in your nose. You're not the first to enter this place, not by a long shot. The wall in front of you is covered in something far older than any pottery shard or stone blade. Images, colours, symbols. You've walked straight into the fading echoes of prehistoric imagination, some of the last great cave paintings humanity ever bothered to make. The figures are familiar but loose, sketched in ochre, charcoal and earth pigments. A deer mid-leap a spiral. A cluster of dots that might be stars, or just someone killing time. You move slowly, eyes adjusting to the dim light, and the deeper you go, the more the paintings twist into abstraction. These aren't just snapshots of daily life. They're emotional, symbolic. You get the feeling someone crawled into this cave not just to show the world, but to talk to it. These late cave paintings, dating from just around 10,000 years ago, are like whispers from a culture on the edge of transformation. For tens of thousands of years, humans had expressed themselves on cave walls across Europe, Asia and parts of Africa, Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira. But now those traditions are fading. It's not that humans suddenly stopped having ideas, it's that the canvas moved. As settlements formed and villages grew, expression began to live outside of caves, etched into tools, painted onto pottery, whispered through rituals instead of sprayed onto limestone. You kneel beside a set of handprints, ghostly white against the reddish wall. Some are tiny, others large. A family? A ritual? A bored teenager? One print has 6 fingers, which either means early humans had a surprise genetic quirk or someone was trying to mess with future archaeologists. Either way, it's unsettling in the best possible way. One historical fact worth remembering: the pigment used in these ancient cave paintings, especially ochre, could be traded across vast distances. You're not just looking at local materials, some of these colours came from quarries miles and miles away. That tells you how much this art mattered. It wasn't a hobby, it was sacred, ceremonial, maybe even a job. The early artists probably weren't lounging around sketching deer for fun. They were acting as the tribe's memory keepers, dreamers and interpreters of the unseen. And here's a quirky little detail. Some researchers believe that certain patterns in cave art mimic the effects of sensory deprivation and trance states. The kind of visual feedback people experience when under the influence of altered consciousness. Strobing lights, spirals, geometric grids. It's possible these paintings weren't just about the world outside the cave, but were attempts to capture what people saw inside their minds. Basically, the world's earliest psychedelic art show. Now, the scholarly debates at scales like torch smoke. Were these paintings meant as spiritual offerings, hunting magic, or some form of prehistoric record keeping? One theory suggests that painting a successful hunt beforehand was believed to increase the odds in reality, a kind of visual incantation. Another says the caves were like sanctuaries used in rituals that involved singing, dancing, or storytelling by firelight. But then there's the argument that maybe, just maybe, people made art because they could. Because even in the earliest human societies, some part of us just needs to leave a mark. You run your fingers near, not on, one of the lines, marvelling at the precision. No rulers, no brushes, no modern tools, just fingers, sticks, and chewed reeds dipped in pigment. And yet, here it is, 10,000 years later. It makes you wonder how many brilliant artists existed before the idea of artist even existed. No names, no fame, just marks that said, I was here. I saw something. As the sun climbs higher outside, the temperature in the cave stays cool and still. A girl ducks in barefoot, holding a small bowl of pigment. She walks to one of the walls like she's done it 100 times. There's no ceremony, just quiet purpose. She dips her finger in the paint and starts drawing something new. A bird, a hand, it's hard to tell, but she's not copying. She's creating. She's continuing a lineage older than any nation, older than farming, older than names. And just like that, you get it. Cave art wasn't disappearing, it was evolving. The need to express didn't fade, it just changed shape. These early humans were beginning to build environments where art would live above ground, on homes, tools, woven cloth, and eventually in language itself. This cave may be among the last of its kind, but the creative spark is far from fading. You exit the cave blinking into sunlight, carrying the echo of that shadowed world with you. Outside, the land is wide and golden, stretching toward new villages and strange rituals you haven't yet seen. But that moment in the cave lingers, the silence, the pigment-stained fingers, the shapes that made no literal sense but felt necessary. As you walk back to camp, a boy holds up a flat piece of stone with carved lines scratched in deliberate rows. Not art exactly, but not meaningless either. It's something in between, a sign of a world slowly shifting from the intuitive to the structured. The first brushstrokes of written expression are still thousands of years away, but the urge to record, to remember, is already pulsing beneath the surface. Tonight, by firelight, someone sketches a spiral into the ash with a stick. Someone else hums a tune that no one wrote down. You see how memory moves from caves to clay, from pigment to voice. You watch as the human story starts to write itself in every surface it can touch. The weather shifts suddenly, and you feel it in your bones before you even see the clouds. The sky darkens at the edges, the air goes still, and the birds, usually chattering in the reeds, fall completely silent. Then comes the wind, hot and sharp, kicking up dust and grit like an ancient warning. Something is changing, not just a passing storm, but a broader, deeper disturbance. You're witnessing one of the most defining forces in early human history, climate chaos. And the people around you? They were going to have to adapt fast, or disappear trying. By 10,000 years ago, the planet is technically in a warmer phase. The ice age has retreated, glaciers have melted, and sea levels are rising. But this new warmth isn't a gentle embrace. It's erratic, volatile. Think of it like Earth flipping through seasonal moods too fast to keep track. Years of drought followed by sudden, devastating floods. Entire rivers changing course, forests creeping into grasslands, grasslands drying into deserts. It's a time of radical unpredictability, and you, along with everyone else alive right now, are just trying to keep up. As you return to the village, you see signs of stress already. A drying stream, once reliable, has pulled back into a muddy trickle. Some of the grain stalks are yellowing too early. People are whispering, not in panic, not yet, but with that tense edge you recognise from any community facing bad news it can't quite name. A group of elders gathers near the fire pit, hunched over a roughly drawn map carved into packed earth with a stick. It's not decorative, it's strategic. They're deciding whether to stay or move. And this is the central challenge now, mobility versus stability. Some communities that had started settling down are rethinking that decision. The dream of permanent villages was appealing when the climate seemed generous, but when the rains don't come, when the earth cracks under your feet and the goats can't find grass, you're suddenly weighing the cost of your stone walls against the pull of the open road again. Here's the cold historical fact. The early Holocene period, which you're smack in the middle of, was punctuated by smaller climatic events, like the 8.2 kilo year event, a sudden global cooling period caused by a massive burst of glacial meltwater flooding into the Atlantic. Temperatures dropped, weather patterns shifted, and entire cultures that had started settling in Europe, the Near East, and North Africa were forced to pivot or vanish. You see it in the archaeological record. Abandoned villages, tools scattered in a hurry, hearths that were never used again. Sometimes new groups appear in the same region a few centuries later, different enough to suggest a cultural reboot. In others, entire areas go dark for generations. It's not apocalypse, but it is the world pressing reset in certain places. The land always gets the last word. One of the women leads you to a storage pit behind her house. She lifts the cover and shows you dried seeds, smoked fish, and some fermented goat milk that smells like it could commit a felony. She explains, without words, just with gestures and a few sharp looks, that they've started rationing. Not panic mode, not yet, but cautious. They are watching the skies, the fields, each other. The younger villagers seem torn. Some argue for packing up and following a nearby river that still flows strong. Others believe this is just a test, a bad year in a cycle that will correct itself. That's the core of this moment in history. Humanity has just begun to place its trust in the land, to think in terms of settlement and seasons, but when the land turns fickle, how much trust is too much? Here's your quirky fact for this section. Researchers have found pollen samples in ancient lake beds that show sudden shifts from forest to grassland and back again within just a few decades. That's nature slamming the climate gear so fast it'd give you whiplash. Imagine building your life around nut-bearing trees and waking up one year to find an empty canopy and a desert wind where your dinner used to be. But don't mistake these early people for helpless victims. They adapt in brilliant, resourceful ways. You see villagers experimenting with new crops, hardier plants that need less water. Others try digging deeper wells or moving their fields closer to marshland. A few families even repurpose animal pens into catchments for rainwater, sealing the bottoms with clay. It's DIY irrigation born out of desperation. And then there's migration, the oldest and most reliable survival tactic in the human playbook. You join a small group preparing to leave, packing essentials onto reed mats and wooden sleds. They've scouted a valley farther north near a spring that hasn't dried up yet. It's a gamble, but staying might be worse. You help tie bundles and watch them vanish into the distance, kicking up dust in their wake. Just another thread in the endless human braid of movement. There's a quiet, scholarly debate simmering beneath all this dust and anxiety. Did environmental change cause the agricultural revolution, or just pressure it along? Some argue that the drying of the Near East pushed humans to begin domesticating plants as a survival mechanism. Others think agriculture was already happening, and climate just forced it to scale up. Again, it's probably both. Push and pull, chaos and creativity hand in hand. As night falls, the wind shifts again, cooler this time, promising a bit of relief. Around the fire, people share stories of ancestors who survived the great dry time when the river vanished and came back 6 moons later. Whether that's fact or folklore doesn't really matter. What matters is the message. We've survived before. We can do it again. You stare into the flames, feeling the smoke sting your eyes. There's no certainty here, no solid ground. But you start to see that this uncertainty is part of the story. Humans didn't rise in spite of chaos. We rose because of it. Every unpredictable shift in weather was a challenge answered with a new idea, a new tool, a new way of seeing the world. And so even in the face of a fickle sky, people here make plans. They store seeds. They listen to the wind. They watch the stars, hoping for a pattern, a sign. They keep going. So do you. You wake up just before dawn, the sky still a blanket of deep violet fading slowly into gold. The air is thick with smoke and something else, sweet, strange, heavy. You roll over on your woven mat, bleary-eyed, and realize the entire village is awake. Not working, not farming, just gathering. Fires have been built in a wide circle. People are smearing ash and ochre on their faces. Someone is chanting under their breath, rhythmic and low, like a heartbeat echoing through dry air. Something is happening. Something sacred. You've stumbled into one of humanity's earliest and most puzzling inventions. Religion, or at least the spark of it, the birth of belief. It doesn't come with temples yet, or organized dogma, or printed commandments. But it's here. Alive in the symbols etched into stone, in the way the villagers circle the fire without needing instructions. In the hush that falls as the old woman with the painted hands steps into the center of the crowd, she begins to sing, not in words but in sound. Long, wavering tones that seem to vibrate in your chest. Someone adds a drum beat, another claps slowly, and the children, unusually still, watch with wide eyes. The woman holds a carved object in both hands. It looks like a human figure, but exaggerated, with massive hips and no face. She lifts it up toward the dawn and begins to sway. There's no script, no prayer book, just movement, rhythm, symbol, and something powerful enough to hold everyone's attention like gravity. This is not just a dance, it's a ritual. And while you may not understand the details, you feel the meaning. The reverence, the fear, the hope. It's like stepping into someone else's dream and realizing they all share the same one. Here's your historical breadcrumb for tonight. There's evidence of spiritual behavior stretching back tens of thousands of years before this moment. Burial sites with grave goods. Cave paintings that seem to mark portals to other realms. But around 10,000 years ago, as humans begin to settle and build permanent communities, belief becomes less of a personal murmur and more of a communal structure. You see the birth of shrines, of sacred spaces, sometimes just a carved stone in a special corner, sometimes entire buildings like those at Göbekli Tepe. Places not for sleeping or eating, but for feeling something bigger. And here's your wonderfully weird fact. In the Near East, Archaeologists have uncovered human skulls deliberately removed from burials, plastered and painted, then placed in homes, almost like early ancestor altars. Imagine Grandma's head sitting on your mantel watching over dinner. Was it reverence, protection, a way of keeping the dead present? No one agrees, but clearly, these early people saw death as something more than an ending. It was a transition, and maybe even an invitation. As the ritual continues, smoke is tossed into the fire, and the scent changes. It's sharp and herbal, like dried thyme and bitter resin. People begin to move in a slow spiral, walking clockwise, some chanting, others weeping quietly. This isn't about doctrine, there's no list of rules. This is emotion, memory, mystery. A woman leads her child forward to touch the central figurine, maybe for luck, maybe for healing. The child looks frightened, but does it anyway. Everyone watches. That's the thing about early religion. It's not about belief in the modern sense, it's about action, ritual, doing the things that feel like they matter, even if you can't explain why. There's no God here in the way you're used to thinking of gods, more like forces, powers, ancestors who still whisper through the trees. Animals with human eyes, the sky, the river, the stone under your feet, all alive, all watching. You sit beside a young man covered in soot and ask what the ritual is for. He doesn't answer, just places a hand on your chest and then points to the rising sun. That's all you get, and really, it's all you need. This isn't a TED talk. It's a transmission, emotional, bodily, instinctive. Now here's where the scholars get fussy. There's ongoing debate about whether organised religion began because of agriculture, or if it predated it. One theory, made popular in recent decades, argues that large-scale religious sites like Göbekli Tepe existed before farming and villages. That maybe it was belief, not bread, that first brought people together. They didn't settle down to plant crops. They settled down to build sacred spaces, to meet, to gather, to perform shared rituals. Then farming evolved as a way to support those gatherings. Others push back, arguing that religion grew out of the pressures of village life. The need to enforce social rules, reward cooperation, explain suffering, and create unity. Farming meant surplus. Surplus meant inequality. Inequality meant someone needed to make that feel fair. Enter the gods. Whatever the timeline, what's clear is this. Something deep in the human psyche demands a narrative bigger than survival. As soon as we had fire and time to sit around it, we started imagining, asking, offering, performing. Religion wasn't a glitch in the software. It was the software, a system to make sense of birth, death, disease, love, drought, stars, dreams, goats, and why sometimes everything just hurts. As the sun finally crests over the hills, the ritual ends, the people begin to disperse slowly, returning to their daily routines with red eyes and painted faces. The figurine is wrapped in cloth and placed in a clay jar. The old woman sits, exhausted but serene, rubbing ash between her fingers. You ask her what the ritual was for. She shrugs and smiles, showing missing teeth. Then she points at the sky again. Later that night, by the fire, you see someone carve a symbol into a piece of bark, a looping shape with lines through it. Maybe a god, maybe a story of maybe just a feeling they didn't want to lose. That's what religion does. It holds on to things you can't. And even now, with your modern mind and all its logic, you can't help but feel it too. The mystery, the awe, the quiet understanding that something, whether cosmic or carved from bone, is listening. You've grown used to the rhythm of village life now, the chores, the warmth of the fire pits at dusk, the gritty taste of flatbread between your teeth. But this morning feels different. You hear the laughter first, then the sharp thwack of a clay pot smashing against stone. There's a commotion near the centre of the village, but it's not panic, it's activity. You step into the dusty square and find a group of women moving quickly, purposefully. Some are hauling woven baskets of millet. Others are stirring something thick and bubbling in a pot. In the centre is one woman in particular, broad-shouldered, arms streaked with mud and ash, voice loud enough to scatter birds from nearby trees. She's clearly in charge, and you're about to learn something modern history tends to skip over. In the early Neolithic, women weren't just background figures. They were builders, makers, leaders, and possibly the reason half of this revolution works at all. She doesn't stop the moving as you approach, just tosses you a sharp look and a damp hide that smells like it recently had opinions. Wipe the stones, she grunts, pointing at the hearth. You do it. You don't argue. No one here argues with her. You spend the day trailing her shadow. She supervises food preparation, carves grooves into pottery to mark storage dates, and instructs two younger girls on how to tie bundles of herbs for drying. Later, she lifts a heavy grinding stone and, with the ease of someone who's done this 1,000 times, crushes dried grain into flour with a sinuous rhythm you can't even begin to mimic. This isn't just physical power, it's the power of memory, of skill passed down not through books, but through hands. This woman and others like her are the invisible infrastructure of early settled life. In these early communities, there is no housewife in the way later eras might imagine it. There's no soft domesticity. There's labour, constant, vital, communal. Women manage food production, childcare, medicine, textiles, and in some cases, religious rites. It's not a matriarchy, not exactly, but it's not a patriarchy either. Authority here is shaped by knowledge, not by who can throw a spear the farthest. And here's your historical dose. Archaeological finds from sites like Çatalhöyük, one of the most well-preserved Neolithic villages, suggest that social roles were far more egalitarian than later societies. Both men and women are buried with tools, symbols of status, and items of religious significance. Figurines of fertility goddesses are common, hinting at spiritual roles connected to women and the cycle of life. The bones don't lie. This wasn't a world dominated by one gender. It was one held together by whoever could get the job done. Later that day, you follow her to a shaded structure just beyond the fields. Inside, herbs hang from beams, bundles of dried plants, feathers, bone charms. A small bowl smokes on the floor, giving off a sharp, minty scent that clears your head instantly. She grinds something in a bowl, roots, bark, maybe insects, then smears the paste onto a child's scraped knee. You've found the healer, the midwife, the medicine woman, all the same person. She gestures to the herbs and starts naming them, not in your language, obviously, but in hers, with tone and gesture and that sly eye roll that says, "Pay attention, this might save your life." You do. She shows you which plants treat fever, which cure stomach cramps, which ones to never ever touch unless you're planning on dying, interestingly. It's chemistry and magic rolled into one, and none of it written down. And here's your quirky fact. There's evidence from several early burial sites that some women were buried with elaborate shell necklaces, painted stones, and tools that may have been used in ritual or healing. It's entirely possible that early Neolithic society not only respected its female healers and craftspeople, but needed them to function. These weren't wives or mothers as static roles. These were specialists, innovators, leaders in their own right. Of course, it's not utopia. You see tension too. A man argues with the woman over storage rights. Who owns the clay jar filled with barley mash? She doesn't yell. She just walks over, opens the jar, scoops out a palmful, tastes it, and then walks away with the rest. Argument over. Influence here is shown through competence, not volume. At night, as the sun slinks down behind the ridgeline, you sit near her at the communal hearth. Children gather around her feet. One hands her a bone doll, rough but clearly loved. She accepts it like it's a royal offering. Then she begins to tell a story. It starts with a fox who steals the moon and ends with the stars falling like snow to cover the earth. Everyone listens. It doesn't matter if they've heard it before, the cadence of her voice, the way she mimics the fox's sly grin, it's all part of something bigger. You realise then that her role extends beyond work. She is memory, history, the oral library of this tiny world. In the absence of books, phones, or even simple writing, it's people like her who carry everything forward. Skills, stories, remedies, names of the dead, the rhythms of planting, the warnings of winter. There's a scholarly debate, of course, about gender roles in early prehistory. Some argue that interpretations of equality are modern projections, that what we see in burial goods doesn't automatically translate to power. Others counter that just because a culture lacked kings and scribes doesn't mean it lacked complex social structures, and women may have held specific domains of authority. As usual, it's messy. People are messy, prehistoric people were no exception. But tonight, as this formidable woman leans back and stares into the fire, you're not thinking about theories, you're just thinking how she runs this place without ever saying she does. No title, no ceremony, just absolute command of her environment. You lie down under the stars, head still buzzing from the herb smoke, and realise, if anyone's going to drag humanity forward through all the hunger and storms and confusion of this raw new world, it's her. It starts with a low grunt or groan. You're half asleep, sprawled beside a smouldering fire pit, when the sound rumbles across the valley, deep, slow, like thunder with bones. You sit up, heart already thumping. Birds scatter from the treetops. Goats bray and stomp nervously in their pens, and then you hear it again. Not thunder, not a storm, something alive, something massive. You scramble to your feet just in time to see a distant shadow towering above the plain, lurching away into the morning haze. And just like that, you've caught one last glimpse of a dying age. You've heard the stories, everyone here has. Great beasts with shaggy coats and tusks as long as a canoe. Giant animals that once filled the land with their thundering migrations, now vanishing one by one. This morning you saw what might be your last mammoth. By 10,000 years ago, the world's megafauna are in rapid retreat. Gone are the days when saber-toothed cats stalked open plains, when herds of mastodons shook the earth, when cave bears made sleeping in a rock crevice a terrible idea. Their time is ending, and no one's entirely sure who or what to blame. You follow the faint trail left by the creature, hoofprints pressed deep into damp soil, tufts of coarse hair clinging to bushes. It's surreal, like tracking a ghost. These animals once defined the landscape, but now they're rumours wrapped in fur. Here's your historical anchor. By the early Holocene, the Earth had lost more than 2/3 of its large land mammals. North America's megafauna, mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, dire wolves, vanished within just a few centuries. Eurasia fared only slightly better, and down in Australia, giant kangaroos and marsupial lions had disappeared even earlier. That's not a slow decline, that's a mass extinction. The cause? That's where the debates heat up. Climate change is a major suspect. As the Ice Age ended, ecosystems shifted fast. Grasslands became forests, wetlands dried out. Species that had thrived in cold, open terrain suddenly found themselves boxed in by unfamiliar weather and shrinking habitats. But then there's the other suspect, the one that's currently holding a stone-tipped spear, humans. You can't ignore the timeline. In region after region, megafauna disappear just after humans arrive in large numbers. It's not proof, but it's suspicious, and you've seen firsthand just how efficient these early hunters can be. A coordinated group with traps, fire, and persistence. That's bad news for anything bigger and slower than a goat. You crouch beside a broken spear shaft. Its wood splintered and half buried. There's dried blood nearby, not human. Something big bled out here maybe a few days ago. A mammoth? A giant bison? Either way, someone tried their luck. It might have worked. It might not have. But it tells you everything about what humans were willing to risk in this moment of ecological chaos. And here's your fringe detail of the day. On Wrangel Island, off the coast of Siberia, a population of dwarf mammoths survived until around 4,000 years ago. That's after the pyramids were built. Picture that, tiny woolly mammoths wandering around a remote Arctic island while humans in Egypt were already chiselling hieroglyphs. The Ice Age didn't vanish all at once. It lingered, awkward and out of place in isolated corners of the world. Back in the village, the hunters return with smaller game. Gazelles, wild sheep, a few hares. There's no mammoth meat roasting on the fire tonight. It's been years since anyone here has eaten anything that big. The tools that once brought down giants are now being repurposed for smaller, more agile prey. You even see someone fletching an arrowhead to hunt birds. Evolution isn't just for animals, it's for people too. But the absence of megafauna changes more than the menu. It changes culture. Rituals built around hunting the great beasts begin to fade. Myths evolve. The mighty creatures become spirits, legends, omens. You overhear an elder telling children about the skyhorns, massive animals with breath that made the snow fall. They're not seen anymore, he says, because the earth no longer needs them, or perhaps because humans were too greedy. You feel the weight of that idea. The loss wasn't just ecological, it was emotional. These animals weren't just resources, they were part of the world view. Their disappearance left a hole, not just in the food chain, but in the human story. There's another argument among scholars, one that stirs controversy in lectures and journals. It asks whether the extinction of megafauna helped humans by forcing them to innovate, or hurt them by stripping away a key food source. Some say the scarcity pushed communities toward agriculture. Others believe it triggered collapse and migration. Like most things in this messy transitional period, the answer is probably yes to both. Life adapts. Not always cleanly, not always willingly. That night, you lie beneath a tattered hide watching the smoke curl above your head. You imagine what it must have felt like to stand before a mammoth, spear in hand, heart racing, to be one tiny human against something that could trample you without blinking, and to win, not just once, but enough times to change the entire world. But now those days are over. The mammoths are mostly gone, the saber-toothed cats are silent, and in their absence a new animal dominates the landscape. Not the biggest, not the fastest, just the most adaptable. The one that can make fire, build traps, store grain, and share stories around a flame. That animal is you. The morning is unusually quiet. No herders yelling, no clattering of grinding stones, just the wind hissing softly through tall grass and the occasional sleepy grunt from someone not quite ready to start the day. But your eyes are drawn to something new, or at least something you haven't noticed until now. A house. A real house. Not a temporary shelter or a hut thrown together with sticks and hides. This thing has walls, a roof, an entrance, and most incredibly, corners. You step toward it, hand brushing against the surface. Smooth, cool walls. Plastered with clay. And suddenly it hits you. Humans have invented indoors. This isn't just a place to sleep out of the rain. It's a shift in how people think about space, safety, and belonging. You duck your head and step inside. There's no door, just a low entrance you have to crouch through. It forces you to enter humbly, to shrink yourself before entering someone else's world. Whether that's intentional or just practical, it feels strangely ceremonial. Inside, it's dim and surprisingly cool. The thick walls trap the night air, protecting against the already rising heat. Your eyes adjust, and you begin to see the layout. A hearth in the centre, clay bins pressed into the corners, baskets, tools, a flat woven mat for sleeping. And on the far wall a mural, faint but still visible. A handprint, a spiral, maybe just decoration, maybe a protective charm, or maybe someone just wanted to leave a mark in their own space. It's not a palace, not even a studio apartment. But in this house, there's order, structure. And that structure reflects a major leap forward in how people view the world. Not just as something to survive in, but something to shape. The village is full of these small box-like homes now. You wander from one to another, noting how they're arranged, not randomly, but in relation to each other. There are shared walls, open courtyards, passageways so narrow you can barely squeeze through. People live tightly packed together now, and that changes everything. Privacy becomes a luxury. Noise becomes constant. Smells? Let's just say ventilation is still a work in progress. But the trade-off is enormous. With permanent homes comes stability, safety, a place to store tools, to raise children, to mourn the dead. You spot a small clay figurine buried partway beneath the floor of one house, carefully wrapped in layers of cloth and ash. A burial, a ritual object, something deeply personal, left to rest beneath the sleeping mat of its owner. Here's your historical anchor. Settlements like Çatalhöyük, dating to around 7500 BCE, show entire communities made up of tightly clustered homes with shared walls and roof access. That's right, no streets. People walked across the tops of their houses and entered from the roof. It's a city made sideways and upward, a beehive of human life in close quarters. Think urban density, without sidewalks or zoning laws. And here's your quirky detail. These houses were often rebuilt on the same site again and again. Tear it down, build it up layer after layer. Some spots in Çatalhöyük have over a dozen levels of occupation, one stacked atop another like a lasagna of human history. You're literally walking on the memories of previous generations. Floors buried beneath floors, dust on top of dust. The ancestors didn't go anywhere, they just moved downstairs. The shift from tents to houses also reshapes how people relate to each other. Who owns the land? Who gets which house? What happens when one family grows too big for their space? You start seeing early hints of property, inheritance, maybe even social status. One home has carefully painted walls. Another is crumbling and patched with mismatched clay. Not everyone lives the same way anymore. You can feel it, a subtle hierarchy rising like smoke through the cracks. There's debate, of course, among archaeologists. Did homes foster inequality by making resources easier to hoard, or did they create the conditions for cooperation? Some argue that the permanence of indoor spaces allowed families to stockpile food and tools, which inevitably led to power differences. Others believe that living so close together actually forced people to develop more communal systems, to share ovens, maintain walls, cooperate on irrigation. Maybe both are true. Maybe every wall divides and connects at the same time. You step back outside, blinking in the sun. A woman is plastering the side of her house with fresh clay. Her hands move with practiced speed. She adds ash to the mix, better insulation, she says. Another woman, younger, is drawing patterns on the wet surface with her fingers. Waves, dots, and a rough animal shape. Function and art sharing a wall. Children play between the houses, weaving in and out of doorways, inventing games that somehow involve throwing stones and yelling at goats. An older man repairs a roof with bundled reeds. You realise that this cluster of boxy homes, tools hung on pegs, fire pits in every corner, is the embryo of every neighbourhood that ever existed. You're not in a camp anymore. You're in a community. And with community comes memory. These houses hold stories. You hear them in the way people talk about who lived where. That's where the man with the twisted foot cooked the best fish. This one used to be my sister's until she moved in with the goat herder. Every home is a chapter, and the village is the book. That night you sit inside one of the homes. The fire burns low, casting dancing shadows across the wall. You lie back on a mat stuffed with straw and dried reeds, staring up at the smoke hole in the ceiling. It's not much, but it's shelter, it's security, and it's only the beginning. Because humans have stopped just reacting to the world. Now they're designing it. It starts with a sound, barely audible at first, a soft clicking of tongues, maybe a few grunts, a sharp exhale, but then the sounds repeat. They're answered. And suddenly there's rhythm, tone, structure. You're not just overhearing noise. You're witnessing language in motion, not just primitive gestures or guttural cues, but actual speech forming, slipping between mouths, travelling across the spaces between people. And it's not just for shouting warnings about snakes anymore. Welcome to the great upgrade in human communication, the age where language grows legs. You crouch near a group of villagers grinding grain outside one of the houses. 3 women work in tandem, their bodies moving in smooth, practiced loops. But it's their voices that catch your attention, short phrases, repeated, a rising tone here, a clipped vowel there. You realise they're talking, not deeply, not philosophically, but conversationally. Gossiping, maybe. You hear the same set of sounds pop up when a man walks by with his eyebrows raised. The women laugh. He makes a face. That's not grunting anymore. That's sarcasm. Language at this stage is rich and rapidly evolving. It's not written, it's barely formalised, but it's effective. And more importantly, it's infectious. Children babble constantly, testing sounds, mimicking adults. You watch one toddler attempt a sentence and burst into tears when nobody understands. He tries again, louder this time. Eventually someone replies, and the kid lights up like he's just unlocked a new superpower. Here's your historical touchpoint. By 10,000 years ago, fully developed spoken languages were already widespread. They were regional, complex, and constantly in flux. The idea that early humans were only muttering and pointing around this time? Complete nonsense. If anything, they were already telling stories, arguing, and probably making the same bad jokes that people do today. You just haven't been in earshot until now. Language gives shape to memory. You see it in how elders pass on knowledge, not just through demonstration, but through metaphor. One man tells a boy to plant like the rain dances, whatever that means, and the boy nods like it's gospel. Another woman explains how to weave a tighter basket using a phrase that translates roughly to follow the goat's path, not the river's. There's poetry here, folk wisdom, idioms that mean everything to the speaker and absolutely nothing to the outsider, until you live here long enough to get it. And here's your quirky observation. Linguists have suggested that in small isolated populations like early villages, languages may have evolved with extreme speed. Words came and went. Pronunciations mutated, and entirely new grammatical structures could appear in just a few generations. That means the people you met 10 years ago might sound entirely different from the kids growing up now. It's language in fast forward, a blur of innovation and weird accidental brilliance. You spend part of the afternoon sitting beside a young woman who's creating something. She draws symbols in the dirt beside her home, loops, zigzags, marks that repeat in patterns. At first you think it's doodling, but then she starts saying the symbols aloud as she draws them. One mark corresponds to a person's name, another to the amount of grain stored in a jar. It's not writing, not yet, but it's flirting with the idea. You're watching proto-record keeping take its first baby steps. It's subtle, soft-spoken, still tangled in speech and gesture, but it's coming. People are already trying to store language, to make it visible, external. Something you don't have to remember because it's etched into the earth, or drawn onto bark, or scratched into bone. Of course, language isn't just a tool, it's a battleground. A few hours later, you overhear a full-blown argument erupt between two families about who has access to the stream. They're not throwing spears, they're throwing words, loud, fast, accusatory. And just like that, you realise, language also gives humans a new way to fight. More nuanced, more exhausting, less bloody, but no less intense. Eventually an elder steps in, speaks a few phrases low and calm, and the shouting dies down. You didn't catch what he said, but the silence that follows is definitely victory. There's a scholarly debate still echoing through anthropology lecture halls about when exactly real language developed. Some believe it came much earlier, perhaps 100,000 years ago, with the rise of Homo sapiens. Others argue for a slower, more staggered evolution. But what's clear in this moment, this dusty village filled with talking, laughing, storytelling people, is that by 10,000 years ago, language is not only established, it's thriving. And it's not just about survival anymore, it's about identity. You can hear the pride in someone's voice when they recite the names of their ancestors, or when they tell a child the origin of a fire-starting trick passed down from a grandparent. Language builds continuity, legacy. You see people naming things, tools, animals, even parts of the village, naming each other. One boy insists his name means skybiter, which probably isn't true, but no one corrects him. That night, as the fire crackles and shadows dance on the walls, someone begins a story. You don't understand the words, not all of them, but the cadence is mesmerizing. Others lean in, heads nod, a few people smile at familiar phrases. You hear laughter in the right places, a gasp, then silence. When the storyteller finishes, everyone sits for a moment just breathing in the quiet, and you realize no image, no tool, no gesture could have done what those words just did. You lie down under the stars later, thinking about all the languages that will come after this one. Hundreds, thousands, whole empires built and broken on the back of shared words. But here, now, in this Vixdal village, language is still intimate, local, spoken by people who know each other's lives and voices and silences. And that may be the most human thing of all, this need not just to survive, but to say something about it. The morning comes with a bite in the air. Not the full body ache of glacial cold, but a crisp edge that reminds you that fire still matters, that despite all the progress, all the tools, homes and harvests, humans are still only ever one bad frost away from the edge. You hear it crackling before you see it. A small fire near the village edge, low and controlled, surrounded by stone and vigilance. A woman crouches nearby, nudging the embers, feeding it dried grass and twigs like it's a pet she's raised from birth. You step closer, and for the 1000th time since arriving in this ancient world, you're reminded, fire didn't just change human life, it created it. There's something hypnotic about the flames, flickering, alive, always moving. It gives off more than heat. It gives off possibility. It cooks. It protects. It allows the night to be more than darkness and guessing games. You watch as the woman places a slab of flatbread on a hot rock near the edge. It sizzles, steams and browns as if it were born for this moment. Fire has been doing this kind of magic for thousands of years by now, but what's new, what's revolutionary, is control. Here's your historical cornerstone. Humans first began using fire at least 1 million years ago, maybe more, but by 10,000 years ago, fire is no longer just something you find or borrow from lightning strikes. It's something you own. These villagers know how to start it. Quickly, intentionally using flint, dried fungus, resin, or even the friction between two carefully chosen sticks. There's always a fire burning somewhere in the village, always a backup ember banked in ash. Someone is always tending it. Because now it's not just survival, it's infrastructure. You walk past several hearths throughout the morning, each serving a different purpose. One smokes chunks of meat on a wooden rack overhead, curing it for storage. Another is used to harden the tips of wooden tools. A third, larger and hotter, is surrounded by clay vessels and damp reeds. Someone's experimenting with early ceramics, firing pots for the first time. It's not perfect, one exposed with a sharp crack that sends everyone ducking. But still, it's happening. Fire isn't just about keeping warm anymore, it's about making things. The smell of smoke clings to everything. Hair, hides, baskets, your own skin. At first, you hated it. Now it smells like home, security, the heartbeat of the village. Even the animals know to keep near it at night. Dogs curl up near dying embers, twitching in sleep. Children play in the glow after dusk. Fire has become more than technology. It's a cultural hearthstone. And here's your weird detail of the day. There's evidence that early humans may have used fire to manipulate landscapes. Ancient charred earth layers suggest that hunter-gatherers in some regions used controlled burns to clear grasslands, attract game, or stimulate plant growth. Think of it as prehistoric gardening with a flamethrower. Not wild destruction, intentional management. A primitive form of ecosystem engineering long before the term agriculture was fashionable. Later in the day you find yourself watching a woman with a shallow pan heating crushed pigmen, some kind of mineral dust mixed with animal fat. She stirs it over the coals until it thickens into a paste, which she then uses to mark a pot with swirling designs. Fire again is at the centre. Not just a means to cook or heat, but to transform materials. This is alchemy in its earliest form, a belief that flame can change the very essence of the world. Of course, not everything goes smoothly. You see a boy try to light a bundle of green twigs and nearly smoke himself unconscious. A log pops and shoots a glowing ember into someone's fur cloak, causing a mad scramble to put it out before it becomes the season's first house fire. Fire is still dangerous, still demanding respect. But now people know the rules. They've grown up inside them. And then the big debate, the one that still sparks heated discussions, pun intended, in academic circles. Did fire make us human, or did humanity simply figure out how to use something that already suited its needs? Some anthropologists argue that the control of fire was the turning point that allowed for shorter guts and bigger brains, literally rewiring our biology by making food easier to digest, freeing up energy for thought. Others say it was just one of many tools, an important step but not the step. Either way, once fire came inside the home, human evolution accelerated. It changed how we slept, how we socialized, how we told stories, and even how we dreamed. You sit by one of the central fires that evening. The air cools fast after sunset, and people draw close, not just for warmth, but for conversation. One man tells a story about a fire that refused to die in a cave during a long winter. Another jokes that fire was the first animal domesticated, loyal, hungry, and likely to bite. Someone plays a bone flute softly, and the notes rise with the sparks. There's something primal about the way everyone orients toward the flame. Even the layout of the village reflects it. Homes built around shared hearths, fire pits positioned at gathering places, space organised around heat and light. You realise that this glowing centre, this ever-burning flame, is what allowed humans to push the dark back, to own the night, to extend the day beyond the setting sun and claim time as their own. And now, lying beside the glowing embers, wrapped in the warmth of flame and furs, you feel the weight of that inheritance. It's not the fire itself, it's the ritual of it, the maintenance, the trust that someone will always be awake, tending the coals, keeping the story of humanity from going cold. Because this isn't just fire, this is civilization's pilot light. You wake up to the sound of something sharp clinking against stone, not the usual scrape of flint or the rhythmic thump of a mortar and pestle. This is brighter, clearer, like glass being tapped, echoed across distance. You follow the noise, or drawn down a path past the goat pens and drying racks, until you find two men crouched over a blanket. Between them lies a collection of objects that look completely out of place in this dusty village. Shards of obsidian, smooth, glossy, black as a moonless night, and nestled among them, seashells, bright pink and spiraled, like someone stole them from a beach hundreds of miles away. You blink. You're looking at the beginnings of something no one expects to find 10,000 years ago. Long-distance trade. It doesn't look like much, this primitive market on a goatskin rug, but the implications are massive. These materials didn't come from around here. Obsidian like that? It only comes from volcanic areas far to the east. And the shells? From the coast. You are nowhere near the coast. Someone somewhere carried these through forests, over hills, across rivers, hand to hand, group to group, until they ended up here, sparkling in the sun, laid out like treasure. You sit cross-legged beside the traders and watch. One of them is pointing at a piece of shell, miming a necklace. The other nods, offers a small woven pouch, and they begin bartering. There's no currency, no fixed price. This is a dance of wanton need, of charm and bluffing, a very human ritual, and one that's about to change the world. Here's your historical anchor. Archaeological evidence shows that obsidian from specific quarries in places like Anatolia and the Caucasus was found at sites hundreds of miles away. Shells from the Mediterranean have been discovered in inland burial sites, far from the sea. The distances are too vast, too deliberate to be coincidence. By 10,000 years ago, humans weren't just moving goods, they were moving networks. Tiny supply chains strung together by footpaths, trust, and a whole lot of foot blisters. Trade doesn't start because someone wants a souvenir. It starts when someone needs something they can't make themselves. Obsidian isn't just pretty, it makes excellent blades, tools, and arrowheads. Shells? Well, those might be status symbols, or used in rituals, or just worn because someone liked the way they clack together. But here's the key. Humans are no longer limited to what they find around them. They're reaching out, stretching their circles wider. And in doing so, they're tying different communities together in ways no one can fully track. You wander through the village with new eyes. The finely carved bone needle that one woman uses. Where did it come from? That bright red pigment the healer smears across her face. Did she dig it up herself, or did it pass through 10 hands before landing in her pouch? Trade isn't just goods anymore. It's ideas, techniques, languages, rumours. And then you notice something else. People start acting differently around traded items. A knife made from imported obsidian is treated with more care than a local flint blade. It gets shown off, touched with reverence. The same goes for the shells and the red pigment. You're witnessing the birth of value. Not the raw can this feed me kind, but symbolic value. Prestige, social capital. Congratulations, you're now living in a world with stuff that matters more because it came from somewhere else. Here's a quirky little detail. There's evidence that some of these traded items weren't always passed for utility. Beads, pigments, and stones were likely moved around in exchange for stories. Gossip, news. A trader might show up with 2 pieces of shiny black stone and leave with a slab of dried meat, 3 names of neighbouring chiefs, and a rumour about a goat that talks. Trade wasn't just economic, it was social. The ancient version of a group chat, the scholarly debate kicks in hard here. Some argue that these early networks were the foundation for complex economies, that long-distance exchange created interdependence and eventually led to the rise of class, hierarchy, even early politics. Others think that's reading too much into it. That trade in this era was casual, occasional, and more about personal relationships than economic systems. But here's what you do know. Someone walked a very long way to bring obsidian to this village. That means they thought it mattered. You follow a group preparing to leave the next morning. 3 travellers, paxes on their backs, strips of dried meat tucked into their belts. They've got goods, shells, hides, bundles of dried herbs, and they're heading west, 3 valleys over, one says, then mimes a mountain, then a river. You don't know the names, maybe no one does, but they know the route. It's in their heads, passed down like a family recipe. You walk with them for a while, feet sinking into cool morning mud, and realise you're watching the earliest tendrils of trade routes. The ancestors of the Silk Road, in sandals made from goat hide. Back at the village, people are talking. Someone's sister has returned with a new type of grain seed. Another claims to have seen a bird with feathers like fire. Someone else laughs and tells a story about a man who traded his cloak for a single shell, then dropped it in the river. You can already feel the shape of myth forming around trade, because anything that crosses mountains and survives is worthy of a tale. By evening, you're sitting by the fire, staring at one of those seashells. It's chipped, small, probably worthless by any modern measure. But here, in this moment, it carries the weight of a journey, of hands and choices, of wants and words. And somehow it makes the world feel just a little smaller and a lot more connected. And you realise, humans are no longer just living where they are. They're stretching invisible strings between themselves and people they've never met. For the first time, what's out there matters here. The morning is heavy with mist. It clings to everything, your skin, your clothes, the grass bending under your feet. The village is quiet, unusually so. No goats bleating, no laughter. Even the children seem to move more slowly, their voices hushed. You sense it before you see it. Something happened. Someone's gone. A group gathers at the far edge of the settlement near a shallow depression dug into the earth. It's lined with stones, smooth river rocks deliberately chosen. A body lies at the centre, wrapped tightly in cloth, knees drawn to the chest, like sleep pretending to be death. Around the body are small offerings, a carved figurine, a necklace of shell beads, a piece of obsidian flint. You kneel at the edge, watching, feeling the weight of something more than grief. You're witnessing one of humanity's oldest instincts, honouring the dead. Death is never new, but burial? Ritualised burial? That's something else entirely. 10,000 years ago, humans weren't just disposing of the dead. They were saying goodbye, telling stories, sending them off, and maybe, just maybe, hoping someone was listening on the other side. The ceremony is simple. One woman sings low, circular melodies that never seem to resolve. Another scatters herbs and ash over the body. A child steps forward and presses a small toy into the cloth bundle. A bone doll, crudely shaped, arms broken but clearly loved. There's no priest, no written rite, but everything feels practiced, reverent. The ground accepts the body slowly, as if reluctant to let go of what it's given. You've seen graves before in the archaeological record. Flexed burials, extended burials, even secondary burials where bones were moved and cleaned. But being here for one, it hits differently. This isn't just disposal, this is memory being marked into earth. Here's your historical fact. By this point in human history, burial practices are widespread. In the Levant, in Anatolia, in Europe and beyond, there's evidence of complex grave goods, arranged corpses, and consistent orientations, facing east for instance, or curled like fetuses. At sites like Çatalhöyük, bodies were even buried beneath the floors of homes. Imagine sleeping above your grandmother every night, not metaphorically, but literally. And here's your curious detail of the day. Some skeletons from early Neolithic sites show traces of red ochre sprinkled over the bones, a pigment long associated with life, blood, and rebirth. The message seems almost defiantly hopeful. Even in death there is continuity. These weren't just burials, they were statements. As the burial continues, you start noticing how people act. They're not wailing or collapsing in theatrical grief. There's solemnity, yes, but also storytelling. One man begins to recount something the deceased once said during a drought. It's not a eulogy exactly, more like a fireside anecdote slipped into a funeral. But everyone nods, laughs quietly. You see it happen, the dead being folded back into the lives of the living, not as a ghost, but as memory. And here's the thing, not everyone is buried the same way. You overhear two women arguing about whether this person deserved the obsidian blade. Apparently someone else, buried last season, had fewer offerings. There's politics in the afterlife already, hierarchy, reputation. Even in death, people are negotiating status. And so you see it. The beginning of the idea that who you are might echo after you're gone. There's debate among scholars about what these early burial practices mean. Were they expressions of belief in an afterlife? Ancestor worship? Just elaborate ways to avoid the smell of decay? The answer, as always, is probably all of the above. Some graves are filled with offerings and art, others are plain and shallow. Did that reflect social rank? Or were some people just loved more? It's uncomfortable to think about, but deeply human. You move through the village later, noticing how people seem to carry the dead with them. Not physically, but in how they speak, what they do. A girl mimics the way the deceased once cracked nuts with a stone. An old man touches a necklace made from the same kind of shell found in the grave. Memory isn't stored in libraries yet. It lives in gestures, in objects, in quiet repetitions. And then, tucked away in a corner of a house, you see something that stops you cold. A human skull, placed deliberately on a shelf smeared with ochre and set beside dried flowers and a small bowl of water. It's not morbid, it's tender. Someone is watching over the watcher. This is more than remembrance, it's connection. Some researchers suggest that these skull displays, found in sites like Jericho and Baysamun, were part of ancestor veneration. Not just mourning, but communication. The dead weren't gone, they were present, still part of daily life, a literal heads-up from your lineage. As the sun sets and the sky softens into lavender, the village slowly returns to normal. Goats are fed, fires are stoked, children play. But there's a quiet tension, as if everyone's walking a little more gently, speaking a little softer. The burial has passed, but its echo remains. You sit by the fire staring into the flames and think about the people who came before, not just in this village, but everywhere. The ones who made tools, painted walls, tamed wolves, planted seeds, and then eventually lay down beneath the earth, wrapped in cloth, whispered over, remembered. They didn't have tombstones, no epitaphs, but they were mourned, loved, named. And in that moment, surrounded by the living, you understand something deeply profound. Death didn't separate early humans from their humanity. It defined it. The morning opens like a curtain, pale light spilling over rooftops and across the dusty earth. Smoke from the early fires drifts lazily through the village as people begin to stir, but this morning you're not heading to the grain bins or the kiln or the pastures. Today you're following the giggles, high-pitched, spontaneous, completely unbothered by the weight of survival. You're spending your day with the youngest humans in the village, the ones who haven't yet learned to worry about the harvest or sharpen a sickle blade. The children of the Neolithic. You spot them easily. A gaggle of small feet slapping against hard-packed dirt, wild hair full of burrs, faces streaked with soot and joy. They're everywhere, playing between houses, chasing goats, building small villages of their own with sticks and mud. One child waves at you and offers a lopsided clay figure shaped like a person, or maybe a duck, or possibly just a lump with arms. "It's me," she declares, then immediately throws it at a boy who laughs and runs. Art and weapon, dual purposes naturally. You notice something immediately. Children aren't hidden here. They're not shielded from life or swaddled in abstraction. They're involved, small hands learning how to grind grain, stir pots, gather kindling. Not out of cruelty or exploitation, but necessity. In a world without schools or screens, learning is embedded in life. A toddler mimics the motions of a woman weaving reeds. A boy tests his aim with a slingshot made from a strip of gut and a bent stick. Every action is play. Every play is training. And here's your historical nugget. Archaeological digs at early Neolithic sites like Çatalhöyük have uncovered small clay figurines, miniature tools, and animal carvings that suggest toy-like purposes. These weren't ceremonial objects buried in graves or hoarded in shrines. They were found in domestic areas, in places where children likely spent their time. The implication? Kids weren't just tolerated, they were active participants in shaping the rhythm of early life. You spend the morning shadowing a group of children who've invented an elaborate game that involves running between certain houses in a pattern only they seem to understand. At one point, a dispute breaks out about who owns a particularly flat mud to rock, apparently the prize or throne or sacred artifact of the game. There's yelling, posturing. Two kids start crying, then just as quickly, it's forgotten. The game resumes. Rules shift, boundaries change. You're watching social order form and dissolve in real time. And then one boy, taller than the others, with wild hair and a confident swagger, leads you to his secret place. It's a little cave beneath an old storage bin, filled with pebbles, feathers, broken tools, and what looks suspiciously like someone's missing obsidian blade. "Don't tell," he whispers, as if he's just handed you the key to the entire village. This too is ancient. The childhood instinct to create hidden spaces, to hoard treasure, to claim a kingdom the adults don't know about. You nod solemnly, because you get it. Here's your quirky fact of the day. Researchers studying tooth enamel from juvenile remains in Neolithic settlements have found patterns indicating childhood stress, periods of famine, illness, or intense labour. It's a reminder that not all was play. These kids lived hard lives. They bled. They worked. Some didn't survive past 5, but they also laughed, made up songs, cheated at pretend games. Humanity didn't invent childhood, it inherited it. As the day unfolds, you notice how children mirror the adults around them. A girl mimics the way her mother scolds a goat. A boy pretends to repair a roof using a basket lid and a stick. It's not just imitation, it's rehearsal. These children are practicing for lives they already understand are coming. There's no buffer here, no teenage pause. One day they play, the next they do, and they're watching everything. You also catch glimpses of mentorship. An older child shows a younger one how to tie a knot using dried sinew. A girl helps a toddler walk by, luring him with a clump of bright feathers. A boy shares a charred acorn snack with his friend, then immediately regrets it when the friend runs off with the rest. Lessons in generosity and regret, delivered without adult interference. There's an ongoing debate among anthropologists. How structured was childhood in early agrarian societies? Some suggest kids were simply small adults, folded into the same routines without guilt and ceremony. Others argue that cultural play, storytelling, and age-based roles existed even then, that childhood was distinct, even if it wasn't coddled. What you see today supports the latter. There's structure here, unspoken but clear. Older kids lead, younger ones follow, infants are passed around like sacred bundles, everyone taking turns holding and soothing them, singing low lullabies you can't translate but understand all the same. Late in the day, you find a girl alone pressing her palm into wet clay near a cooking pit. She looks up, smiles, then adds lines to turn it into a sunburst. You sit beside her. She doesn't speak, just keeps working, her small hands careful and methodical. No one told her to do this. There's no grade, no approval, just the impulse to make a mark, to shape the world, even if it's just one small corner of a wall, and suddenly it hits you. This child might grow up to grind grain, to birth children, to bury her friends, but right now she's here, and she's creating. As night falls, families gather, and the children are finally still. Some collapse in piles, limbs tangled. Others lie beside their parents, staring at the stars. A few whisper stories, some borrowed from the adults, others completely fabricated. You hear one child declare that she saw a goat with wings. No one corrects her. Because here, the lines between real and imagined aren't so strict. Because here, childhood still has room to wonder. You wake to soft snuffling near your feet. Not human, not hostile, just curious. You open your eyes and find a goat staring directly into your soul, its beard twitching like it's contemplating your worth. A dog lies nearby, tail thudding against the floor in a slow, sleepy rhythm. Someone's chicken clucks lazily from a clay basket in the corner. Welcome to the Neolithic version of a shared studio apartment, where your roommates have hooves, beaks, and the occasional flea problem. The line between wild and domestic has never been blurrier. This isn't a petting zoo. It's not a barn, it's a home, and it's filled with more than just people. You sit up, brush straw off your face, and take stock of the new roommates. 2 goats, a dog, 1 chicken, and what looks like a very old cat with half an ear missing. Everyone here has a job. No freeloaders, not even the animals. You step outside and it's more of the same. Dogs lounging in doorways. Chickens darting between feet. Sheep clustered in shaded pens waiting to be led out. And not by accident. This is an ecosystem, an intentional one. People have stopped merely chasing animals. Now they're living with them. You're in the heart of domestication's next big phase. Animals as partners, not just prey. Here's your historical baseline. By 10,000 years ago, humans had already domesticated dogs, goats, and likely sheep. Pigs were just getting comfortable with the idea of pen life. Chickens? Not quite yet, but birds were starting to get interesting. The important shift wasn't just about breeding. It was integration. Animals didn't live outside the village anymore. They lived in it, often inside it. Your breakfast snored next to your bed. You follow a woman as she opens a low wooden gate, releasing her goats into the morning sun. They jostle and bleat, but follow her with clear recognition. She clucks her tongue in a specific rhythm, and the animals respond. Not perfectly, but enough. There's training here. Mutual understanding, not affection necessarily, though you do see her stroke one goat's nose absently like muscle memory. But trust. And the dogs. Oh, the dogs, they're everywhere. Small to medium-sized, lean and scruffy, with intelligent eyes and strong opinions about who's allowed near the grain stores. You watch one dart between huts, barking twice, then turning to make sure someone's following. Turns out a goat's escaped its pen and is currently trying to climb a pile of firewood. The dog's not herding exactly, but it's helping. Not because it was told to, because it wants to. Here's your quirky fact. Genetic studies have shown that dogs evolved a unique set of facial muscles that allow them to raise their inner eyebrows, something wolves can't do. That means they literally evolved to make sad puppy eyes. You're not imagining it. They've been manipulating humans with cuteness for thousands of years, and it's working, but domestication is more than manipulation. It's logistics, space, waste, disease. You see someone scraping animal droppings into a pit far from the village. It's not just for cleanliness, though, let's be honest, that helps. It's fertilizer. Animal waste is starting to be valued, used, even hoarded. Another villager adds it to a garden plot outside the settlement, covering it with ash and straw. This is no longer nature doing its thing. This is early agriculture teaming up with early animal husbandry and figuring out how to be best friends. Inside one of the homes, you find a low clay shelf lined with eggs, small, speckled, mostly intact. Not all of them are for eating. Some are kept warm under woven baskets. Someone's experimenting with hatching. It doesn't always work. Sometimes the chick dies, sometimes it escapes and causes havoc. But sometimes, success. One more layer in the ever-growing pyramid of domestic life. Still, it's not all harmony. You see a boy chase a piglet out of a food bin with a stick, shouting something that sounds deeply personal. One woman complains loudly that the dog chewed through her basket again. A goat eats someone's necklace and then stares blankly when accused. It's messy, it's loud, it's frustrating, but it's working. And here's where the scholars start to wrestle. Was domestication a gradual, symbiotic process? Animals choosing humans as much as humans chose them? Or was it a slow conquest, humans asserting control over wild species until they broke them? The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Early domesticated animals were different from their wild cousins. Smaller, tamer, more socially adaptable. But they still retained agency. They weren't robots. They still ran, escaped, and bit. The psychological shift is what fascinates you most. These people are reprogramming their minds to think about animals not just as meat or threat, but as presence. Companions, helpers. You overhear someone refer to a goat as the old man, and laugh when it sneezes during a dust storm. The names come easily. So do the stories. One woman swears her pig saved her child from a snake. You're not sure it's true, but that's not to the point. The pig has become part of the narrative. Late in the afternoon, you help herd sheep into a temporary corral. It's hot, the animals are stubborn, and your legs are scratched from low branches. But when the gate shuts, there's a small cheer. Not loud, but genuine. Success. A dog flops down in the dust, panting, tail wagging slowly. You scratch behind its ears, and for a moment it's just you and the dog. Not across 10,000 years, but right here, present, mutual. As the sun sets, the animals settle too. Goats lie beside huts. Pigs burrow into warm soil. Dogs curl up close to the fires, mopos, closer still to the people. You sit near one, its breathing slow and steady, like the ticking of an ancient clock. This isn't domestication as dominance. It's cohabitation. It's coexistence. It's the earliest foundation of the tangled, complicated, beautiful mess that is the human-animal bond. And somewhere in the night, you roll over in your blanket only to find a goat has stolen your pillow. Again, you let it keep it. The village is tense today. Not panicked, yet, but the air is heavy in that way you can't explain, only feel. Conversations are shorter, glances sharper. Someone's hoarding water from the stream, someone else is claiming a pot of grain went missing, and a shouting match just broke out over who owns a patch of squash vines growing near the edge of the field. You can practically smell the friction. Welcome to one of the oldest human experiences, rising tensions in a community that's gotten just a little too crowded for comfort. It's bound to happen. The village has grown, not explosively, but steadily. More births, fewer deaths, a few families arriving from elsewhere with trade goods and stories and extra mouths to feed. Space is tight. Resources, once shared easily, now seem limited. And with scarcity comes suspicion. You walk through the narrow alleyways between homes and see signs of change. Pots locked inside houses, animals tethered closer to doors, whispered conversations that go quiet when you pass. This is new territory, socially speaking. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived in small, mobile bands. A couple dozen people at most, tied together by blood or shared survival. Disagreements could be solved by walking away. Now, that option's fading. The houses are permanent. The grain is stored. The goats are too stubborn to herd back into the hills. People are learning painfully what it means to coexist when no one's leaving anytime soon. You sit in on a gathering near the central hearth. Not exactly a council meeting, there's no chief, no official government, but a kind of impromptu airing of grievances. Someone's goat destroyed a neighbour's bean plants. Another woman accuses a boy of sneaking into her storage bin. There's a lot of hand-waving, a little posturing, and one excellent insult that you don't understand but sounds incredibly personal. And here's your historical benchmark. By 10,000 years ago, many Neolithic villages were beginning to experience social strain. As populations grew and private property, especially food stores, became more common, so did conflict. Archaeological evidence shows defensive architecture appearing in some settlements. Walls, ditches, narrow entrances designed to limit access. It wasn't war exactly, but it wasn't peace either. These were communities starting to build boundaries. Here's your curious twist. At places like Jericho, some of the earliest known stone walls were built not to keep people out, at least not at first, but to control water. Flooding was a real danger, especially as climate patterns shifted. But once those walls went up, people began to realize something else. They could keep each other out too. What began as protection from nature slowly morphed into a tool for control. Every barrier is a decision about who belongs and who doesn't. Back in the village, two men are arguing over a fallow patch of land that used to be communal. One claims his family worked it first, the other says it was agreed to be shared. A third person steps in, older, quieter, respected, and proposes splitting the crop. It's not perfect, but it's enough to settle things for now. You see relief ripple through the group like a sigh. Because deep down, everyone knows, too much conflict, and the whole fragile system starts to wobble. The children, meanwhile, are mostly oblivious. They dart between homes, giggling, kicking up dust, but you notice that some of them now stay closer to their family's space. There's less mixing than before. Little social walls forming, just like the clay ones between houses. You even hear a child refer to another as the one from the West House, with a tone that suggests otherness. It starts young. That afternoon you help a woman carry water from the stream. She tells you in gestures and rough phrases about a time when everyone drew water from the same spot, no questions asked. Now, people take turns, there are arguments. Someone was caught sneaking water at night. It's not just about thirst, it's about trust. And in a world where your neighbour's bad decision can literally cost you your life, trust becomes currency. There's a scholarly debate still ongoing about when inequality really took root. Some argue it was an unintended consequence of agriculture. As soon as you can store surplus, someone will store more than someone else. Others believe inequality was always lurking, even in hunter-gatherer bands, just waiting for the right conditions to flourish. Either way, you're seeing it unfold here, in real time. Not kings and palaces, just small imbalances, tiny power shifts. A family with more grain, a man who controls the best hunting dog, a woman whose roof doesn't leak. These things matter. As dusk falls, you walk to the edge of the village and sit beside a low wall made of stacked stones. It's new, just a few weeks old, but already serves a clear purpose. It marks where us ends and them begins. Beyond it is open land, freedom, possibility, but also risk, unknowns. The wall says, this is ours, and that's both comforting and dangerous. You return to the hearth as a night deepens. The tension hasn't vanished, but it's quieted. For now, people sit in a loose circle, eating, talking softly. Someone plays a flute. A child falls asleep against her mother. The dog curls at her feet, eyes half closed, ears still twitching, and you realise something: this village is learning to manage pressure. Not avoid it, not solve it entirely, just manage it. Through negotiation, compromise, ritual, storytelling. It's messy, imperfect, but it's the beginning of civilization. Not as an invention, but as a daily choice. Because it turns out that living together is hard, but walking away? That's harder. The sun isn't even up yet when you hear voices. Low, tense, urgent. You sit up, brushing dust from your hair, and peek out through the doorway. Two women stand face to face near the grain store, not shouting, but not exactly whispering either. You recognise one of them, the potter, whose strong hands and louder than average opinions you've come to know. The other, a weaver with a half-finished bundle of flax in her arms. They're arguing, again. This time about whose turn it is to use the communal oven. But as the disagreement unfolds, you can't help but notice something beyond the oven. Who's watching? The village is awake now, and everyone's pretending not to be listening. But they are. Men pause in their chores. Children go quiet. One man whispers something to another, who nods. The potter raises her voice. The weaver crosses her arms. Neither backs down. And slowly, what started as a spat over baking rights becomes something else, something bigger. And you realise you're watching it happen. Power shifting along the lines of gender, work, and influence. For generations now, tasks have been loosely divided. Not rigidly, not by law. There are no laws, but by rhythm, habit, the unspoken choreography of village life. Women manage food, textiles, medicine, memory. Men tend animals, shape stone, build walls. But these roles aren't fences. They blur, overlap. And lately those overlaps are causing tension. Because influence doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes it comes from knowing how things work. You follow the potter later as she walks the edge of the village, carrying a cracked vessel under one arm and muttering to herself. She's frustrated, but not defeated. You watch her repair the pot with a layer of clay, then pass it to a younger woman with clear instructions. She's not a leader by title, but people listen to her. They follow her advice, ask her opinion, and not just about pottery, about who's trustworthy, about which family should guard the grain next, about who's been sneaking extra turns at the well. Here's your historical snapshot. In many early Neolithic societies, evidence suggests women held significant power, not through brute force, but through specialised knowledge and social influence. In settlements like Çatalhöyük, figurines of female deities were common, and many homes show signs of female-centred rituals. There's even evidence that burial goods and spatial importance within homes didn't always favour males. This wasn't patriarchy yet. It wasn't matriarchy either. It was something messier, something fluided. And here's your curious detail. Some anthropologists believe that early agricultural societies may have leaned toward matrilineal structures, inheritance through this mother's line. Not everywhere, but in certain places. It makes sense, especially when the land is stable and the home is the heart of production. If your mother owns the grain, the oven, and the know-how to keep your baby alive through the winter, you listen to her. You don't just thank her, you follow her lead. Back in the village, the weaver has taken control of the oven. She kneels beside it, feeding the flames, brow furrowed with concentration. The potter walks past without a word, but later you see them speaking again, quieter this time, compromising, negotiating. They may not like each other, but they understand something critical. They need each other. The oven won't run itself, the grain won't grind itself, the baskets won't carry themselves, and no one's going to fetch water alone in this heat. You see the men watching too, not interfering, not laughing, just paying attention. And then, without much fanfare, the weaver's husband begins reinforcing the oven walls with a few extra stones. The potter's son brings a basket of fuel. Cooperation emerging not from authority, but from balance. It's not that gender roles are vanishing, they're evolving, negotiated daily, refined through friction. And there's the unspoken, undeniable fact that the women know everything. Who gave birth last season? Who's pregnant now? Who's stealing? Who's sleeping with whom? They hold the village's social map in their heads, and they update it in real time. They're the historians, the healthcare system, and the Security Council, all in one. There's a scholarly debate naturally about how gender roles truly operated in early settled societies. Some insist women lost power as soon as property appeared, arguing that male-controlled land ownership led inevitably to patriarchy. Others believe that in these earliest villages, where survival still hinged on cooperation, women's labour and influence were too essential to suppress. Again, both sides have evidence, but here, right now, in this moment, you're watching a social experiment still in progress. By midday, the oven bakes steadily, filling the air with the sharp, comforting scent of barley and ash. The potter and the weaver sit nearby, not exactly relaxed, but calm. Other women come and go, dropping off loaves, collecting firewood, trading gossip. You realise the oven isn't just for baking, it's a hub, a node in the village's neural network, and the ones who control it, they're not just cooks, they're connectors. Later, in the cool of evening, a woman tells a story about a trickster bird who stole fire from the sun and brought it to the village. In her version, the bird was female, clever, persistent, and completely underestimated by the male hunters who claimed they'd done it first. The kids laugh, the adults smirk, but no one corrects her, because sometimes truth and myth walk the same path, and sometimes the strongest people in the room are the ones who never raised their voice but made sure everyone ate. You smell it before you see it. An earthy, wet scent, like rain hitting hot clay. But there's no rain, just smoke, dust, and something bubbling at the edge of a fire. You follow the sound of scraping and splashing to a small shelter with a low ceiling and a thick layer of soot baked into the walls. Inside, a group of women crouches around a shallow pit. One of them stirs a vessel that's glowing faintly orange at the edges. The pot itself is crude and lopsided, but it's holding its shape. Just barely. You blink. You've arrived at the birth of something eternal. Welcome to the age of pottery. Clay has been everywhere for a long time, used to seal baskets, to patch walls, to mark ownership with handprints and symbols. But now it's being shaped into vessels, and not just sun-dried, but fired, hardened, transformed. This is more than another tool. It's a revolution in how humans store time. You crouch beside the woman working the vessel. Her hands are steady but streaked with burns and clay dust. She adds another handful of straw to the fire and watches the flame climb the pot's side, listening to the cracks like a doctor checking a pulse. Pottery isn't just made, it's coaxed into existence. Every pot is a gamble. The wrong clay mix, it explodes. Too hot, it warps. Too cool, it crumbles. But when it works, it lasts. That's the point. Here's your historical fact. Pottery appears independently in the multiple regions around the same general time frame. Japan's Jomon culture, the Middle East, parts of Africa, and even early China. It didn't spread from a single origin like some technologies do. People just figured it out, again and again, wherever they needed to hold water, cook grain, or keep rodents out of their food. In the Levant and Anatolia, where you are now, early fired pottery began appearing around 7000 BC. That may not sound dramatic, but it changed everything. You watch as another woman kneads a lump of clay mixed with straw and crushed shell. She rolls it into a coil and begins building up the wall of a new vessel. No potter's wheel yet, just fingers, patience, and an eye for shape. You can see her adding slight indentations to the sides, not functional, just beautiful. A small flourish in a world that's always been practical first. A reminder, art survives even in the hardest lives. Then she pauses, wipes her hands and presses a symbol into the still wet surface. It's simple. 2 curved lines intersecting, but it means something. You recognise that it's a mark, a signature. That pot will carry it long after she's gone. The clay will harden, the symbol will fossilise. Thousands of years from now, someone will find it buried beneath layers of sediment and wonder what it meant. And here you are, watching it happen. Here's your quirky fact of the day. Some of the earliest pots found at Neolithic sites still contain traces of what they held. Scientists have scraped the insides of these ancient vessels and identified milk, barley, even beer residue. Yes, beer. Which means not only did these early people invent pots, they immediately figured out how to use them for fermented beverages. Priorities. You step outside the shelter, blinking in the daylight, and spot a cluster of finished pots lined up near a drying rack. They're not uniform. Some are squat, others tall, a few hilariously tilted like tipsy teapots. But they're sturdy. And they're already changing the rhythm of daily life. Grain, once stored in baskets that mice could chew through, now sits safely in sealed pots. Water can be carried more easily. Meals can be cooked inside vessels instead of roasting everything over fire. Food keeps longer, which means fewer trips to the fields. Which means more time to do other things, repair houses, watch children, tell stories. You're watching technology alter the shape of time itself. And here comes the scholarly debate. Did pottery emerge primarily as a practical response to agriculture? Or was it originally a ceremonial tool used for rituals, feasts, offerings to spirits? Some point to elaborately decorated early pots and suggest spiritual significance. Others say, look, if you're starving, you don't carve spirals into your dinner bowl. But maybe it's both. Maybe the sacred and the functional weren't separate yet. Later, as the sun dips low, you find yourself holding a small cup. It's warm from the fire. The surface is rough, but the shape is intentional, fitted to a hand. Inside is a thick fermented barley drink. It's sour. Kind of horrible, but someone offers it with pride and you drink it anyway. This too is part of the shift. Pottery doesn't just store food. It shapes social moments as shared meals, gatherings, toasts, even if they don't have a word for that yet. As night falls, people gather around the kiln fire. It's more than just heat now. It's a beacon of transformation. Clay into ceramic, wet into dry, idea into object. A man tells a story about how the earth swallowed the sun and spat it back out as a bowl full of fire. Everyone laughs, but the bowl he holds in his hands glows, and no one dares say it's just a pot. You lie on your back later, staring at the stars, a small pot resting beside your head. It's nothing special, not even symmetrical, but it'll last longer than the hands that made it, longer than the village, maybe longer than anything else here. Because when humans learned how to shape the earth with fire, they didn't just gain containers, they gained memory. Night falls faster than usual, as if the sun couldn't wait to dip behind the hills. But this evening there's no rush to sleep. Fires are lit in clusters around the village, not just for warmth or cooking, but for gathering. The usual rhythm of work is paused. Someone is tuning a simple bone flute by blowing soft notes through it. A drum, no more than stretched animal skin over a hollowed log, thuds gently in the background. People are arriving in pairs and small groups, carrying bundles of dried herbs, a flask of fermented barley, even a few carved rattles. You've stumbled into something precious and universal, a night of music and dance. There's no stage, no formality, no flyers posted on clay walls, just anticipation. You find a spot near one of the fires and sit cross-legged, the smoke curling into the sky like a signal to the stars. Children giggle behind you. Old women whisper. Then, like lightning without thunder, the first voice rises, wordless, high and clear, carrying through the air like it's been waiting to escape all day. The woman singing sways as she sings, her hands raised, fingers fluttering like bird wings. The melody is circular, hypnotic, looping back into itself like it's chasing its own tail. The drum follows, slow at first, then building, joined by clapping, stomping, the occasional whoop. It's impossible not to feel it in your bones. The rhythm isn't clean, it isn't polished, but it moves. Here's your historical fact. While musical instruments made of bone and wood are fragile and rarely survive, we've found flutes in Europe dating back over 40,000 years. The oldest known, made from vulture bone, plays a scale that would be familiar today. By 10,000 years ago, there's no question. Music wasn't new, it was essential. These people had rhythm in their souls long before they had pottery in their hands. You watch as more people join in, some clapping, others singing in bursts of sound that hover somewhere between song and chant. Then the dancing begins. Not ballet, not structured, but primal. Loose, joyful, a man with a crooked knee hops in place to a rhythm that only makes sense if you let it. A girl spins until she falls over laughing. The group opens and closes like lungs. Inhale, exhale, drawing people in and letting them go. It's a release. That's what it is. After days of planting, grinding, chasing goats, losing tempers, sharing meals, this is how the pressure gets let out. You can feel the weight in the shoulders around you slowly melt into movement. Even the most reserved among them tap their fingers, nod their heads. There's no audience, no judgment, only rhythm, only now. Here's your quirky fact of the night. Archaeologists working in Neolithic sites have found what they believe to be early rattles made from fired clay. Small hollow spheres with seeds or stones sealed inside. Not tools, not weapons, just instruments. A prehistoric maraca, essentially. Because even before we wrote things down, we shook them to make noise and called it joy. There's debate among scholars, of course there is, about the purpose of early music and dance. Some argue it was spiritual, tied to rituals of fertility, harvest, or the honouring of ancestors. Others say it was purely social, a way to bond communities and reduce tension. Still others believe it was a form of communication, especially in cultures with limited language. But as you sit here, watching people move in sync without a single planned step, it becomes obvious. It's all of the above. The healer dances next, slowly at first, then with an intensity that draws every eye. She circles the fire, trailing smoke from a bundle of burning herbs. Her movements mimic animals. First a bird, then something low and stalking. She growls, she hums. Children watch her wide-eyed, half afraid, half delighted. This isn't just performance, it's storytelling. Physical myth, she's not dancing about the hunt, she is the hunt. You join in eventually, awkwardly at first, your feet unsure, your body remembering how to be unself-conscious, but no one laughs. There's no spotlight, just movement. You spin with a boy half your height who takes his role as dance partner very seriously. A woman catches your hand and swings you in a circle so fast your ears ring. You can't remember the last time you forgot yourself like this, and then the music changes. Slower, heavier, a deep rhythm builds and voices join in, not singing anymore, but chanting. The words are old or maybe new. Maybe made up on the spot, it doesn't matter. The meaning isn't in the syllables, it's in the sound, and everyone knows it. Even the wind quiets to listen. You sit again, breathless, sweat cooling on your skin, and realize something. Music is the glue. It holds this strange, ever-shifting society together. When the grain stores run low, when tempers flare, when someone dies or a child is born or it just rains for 5 days straight, there's a rhythm to help make sense of it, to carry it, to turn chaos into pattern. Before you leave, someone presses a small bone flute into your hands. It's worn smooth, slightly cracked, but still playable. You lift it to your lips and blow gently. A single wavering note drifts out. Not perfect, but real. And the woman who gave it to you nods, satisfied. "Now you can speak," she says. You walk back toward your sleeping mat under the stars, the firelight behind you, the music still ringing in your ears. The dancing continues. Someone's banging two stones together. Someone else is singing about a fish that climbed a tree. None of it is written down, but none of it will be forgotten. Because when you can't say it with words, you sing, you drum, you dance, you wake to the sound of a soft voice, old, raspy and slow, like a creek running low in the heat of summer. The village is still mostly asleep, except for a few fires beginning to crackle, and one old man sitting in the doorway of a round mud brick house, speaking to a boy no older than 8. The boy isn't fidgeting or yawning. He's listening, really listening, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Whatever the old man is saying, it matters. You settle nearby, unnoticed, and let the story wrap around you like a blanket. He's telling a tale about a man with legs like tree trunks and a voice so deep it scared wolves away. The man falls in love with a woman who speaks to snakes. There's something about journey, a mountain that eats people, and a wolf made of smoke. The details shift. He repeats himself. But none of that matters. It's the telling that counts. The tone, the rhythm, the pauses that hang in the air like mist. This isn't a bedtime story, it's history. Before there were books or carvings or tablets, there was this. People sitting in circles, letting memory pass through their mouths like shared breath. You realise, watching this tiny audience of one, that stories aren't decorations, they're tools. They teach, warn, preserve. You can forget a fact, but a story, a good one, it stays. Here's your historical touchpoint. Oral tradition is humanity's oldest method of record keeping. Every culture has used it, some still do, to preserve genealogies, laws, rituals, and epics long before writing was invented. Stories were how early humans remembered which plants healed and which killed, how they navigated rivers, and why you never sleep near a certain tree during full moons. They were libraries wrapped in flesh and voice. You move through the village that day listening. The stories are everywhere. One woman hums a song about the time it rained for 9 days straight and the goats learned to swim. A group of boys argues over the details of a tale about a creature with one giant eye and a head shaped like a gourd. A grandmother scolds her granddaughter with a proverb that translates roughly to, "Don't trust a man who speaks only at night." And that's the thing, these aren't just fun, they work, they carry knowledge, practical lessons wrapped in absurdity, morals with teeth, memory made entertaining. The boy from earlier repeats the giant leg story to another child that afternoon, adding new details. A firebird, a river of bones. He's already reshaping it, and so it lives. Here's your quirky fact. Some oral cultures were able to preserve stories with astonishing accuracy for thousands of years. Aboriginal Australians, for example, retained narratives describing landscapes as they were over 10,000 years ago. Stories that help track environmental changes and ancestral migrations. That kind of memory isn't a coincidence. It's design. A skill, honed and practiced, passed from mouth to ear like fire between torches. There's a scholarly debate, naturally, about the reliability of oral traditions. Were they distorted over time like a prehistoric game of telephone? Or were they refined, tested, purified through repetition? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, but it's clear that the core truths, the values, the structures, the deep warnings remained. The story might gain a few more monsters along the way, but this lesson stays sharp. As the sun reaches its peak, you find a group of teenagers gathered near a tree. One of them standing with arms raised, face painted in streaks of ash and red ochre. He's reenacting a battle, not a real one maybe, but one that feels real. He lunges, groans, narrates his own death dramatically, then springs up and bows. Laughter erupts. Someone tosses him a piece of flatbread like it's payment. You realise you've just watched theatre happen, a story performed instead of told. The mediums change, but the purpose stays the same, to carry memory forward. That evening, an elder calls the children together. It's not a formal thing, just a slow gathering near the largest fire. She sits on a flat stone, her back straight, her face creased with years and smoke. Silence falls around her like snow. She begins. Her voice is soft at first. The story is about the moon and why it hides its face. About a girl who climbed a tree so tall it touched the sky. About a promise broken and a lesson learned. No one interrupts. No one moves. Even the dogs lie still. And here's the most remarkable thing: everyone already knows this story. They've heard it before, probably dozens of times. They could recite parts of it in their sleep. And yet, they listen. Because stories aren't just about information. They're about connection, shared memory, a moment of unity in a world where so much depends on keeping the village from falling apart. You look around the fire and realize this is what holds them together. Not just food or shelter or trade, but this. A shared understanding of who they are, what they've been through, what matters. These stories are the village. When someone dies, they're remembered in stories. When someone is born, they're introduced through them. When trouble comes, the story of how it was once faced and survived is retold, a shield of memory. Before sleep takes you, you hear a quiet voice beside you. A child asking an older sibling, "What happened to the girl who climbed the sky tree?" And the sibling smiles and says, "She's still up there, waiting for someone brave enough to find her." And just like that, the story lives on, because nothing is more human than turning memory into myth, and nothing is more powerful than a story told just right. The morning fog hangs low, swirling between the huts and fields like the earth's breath still hasn't settled. You walk slowly today. The village is quiet in a way that feels intentional, like a pause before something begins, or maybe before something ends. There's no single moment marking the shift, no announcement, no rising flag, but you feel it in your bones. The world you've been living in for weeks, this world of sharpened flint and clay pots and barley smoke and barefoot children, it's changing. You're standing at the edge of something immense. Cities, writing, kings, wars, temples, taxes, and gods with business plans, but not yet. Right now, you are standing in the final breath of a world before history starts keeping receipts. You sit with the elders as they go about their morning routines. One woman mends a basket, another chews a reed to soften it for weaving. The man from earlier, the storyteller, is asleep in the sun, mouth open, snoring like thunder under a blanket. Around them, life goes on, the goats still bleat. The grain still waits to be threshed. A dog steals a flatbread and instantly regrets it when it burns his mouth. But under all of it, you feel it again, that quiet pivot. Something is leaning forward, about to leap. There's movement near the centre of the village. A group is gathered around a series of small stones arranged in a spiral. You've seen kids play games like this before, but this one's different. Older teens, not children. They are marking the stones with symbols, patterns that seem to stand for days, people, events. A crude calendar. A record? You ask, and someone shrugs. It's to remember. That's all they say. Here's your historical anchor. Around this time, 10,000 years ago, humans begin marking time and events with symbols that go beyond decoration. We're still pre-writing, but not by much. In places like Mesopotamia, symbolic tokens are being used to track quantities. Sheep, grain, labour. These aren't just scratches in clay. They're proto-accounting systems, memory externalized, stories, now with math. You help a boy carry a basket of clay tokens to a storage pit. He explains very proudly that each one stands for something. One round disc means a pot of grain. A triangle means a goat. A wavy line, water from the spring. They bury the tokens in a jar, seal it, and set a rock on top. Later, when the supplies are counted, someone will dig them up and read the record. It's not writing, not yet, but it's the whisper before the shout. And here's your fringe fact of the day. Some scholars believe that early Neolithic societies developed systems of record-keeping before the rise of full-blown agriculture. That means people were organising information before they were organising farms. In other words, the need to remember things might have come before the need to grow them. It flips the script. Maybe we didn't farm because we settled. Maybe we settled because we needed to count. You sit with a woman whose daughter has just returned from a distant settlement. She brings tales of strange stone houses built high on ridges, of new ways of planting flax, of people who burn their dead instead of burying them. The woman listens carefully and then says, "We should send someone back with her." Trade has always been a thread in this world, but now it's becoming a network, a route, a map not of geography but of influence. One elder shows you a stash of obsidian blades kept under her sleeping mat. "Too valuable to use," she says. You ask why she keeps them. "Because one day someone will come who needs them more than I do." It's an economy now, not just barter and need. Speculation, planning for the future. The seed of value is being planted not in the ground, but in the idea of exchange. There's a scholarly debate about this shift, when exactly barter turned into commerce, when resources turned into commodities. Some say it happened the moment one person saw a polished stone and thought, "This could get me more than one thing." Others argue it was more abstract, tied to ritual and gifting, but you're watching it bloom here naturally, quietly, not because someone invented money, but because people started thinking ahead. Later that afternoon, a young woman returns from the hills with news. Someone found another village, not far, 3 valleys over, larger, with walls and people who don't bury their dead at all. The news spreads like wildfire. Everyone is buzzing. You'd think she'd discovered an alien civilization, and in a way she has. Every valley over is a potential fork in the road of humanity, a new language, a new way of being. That night, the storyteller wakes and tells his final tale for the evening. It's not about animals or tricks to spirits or the girl who climbed the sky tree. It's about people. Builders, planters, travellers. He names them. Names that echo the very villagers sitting beside you. He says their names will go on forever, carved into memory. And for the first time you wonder if he means it literally. Carved, remembered, written. Because this world, it's on the edge. A breath before the plunge. The people you've lived with, laughed with, eaten with, they're about to become history. Not in the abstract sense. In the stone and tablet, statue and monument, artifact and excavation kind of way. Everything up until now has been prelude. Prologue. Spoken. Forgotten. Passed down in firelight whispers. But the door is opening. To scribes, to temples, to taxes, to war and law and bureaucracy, to cities with kings and walls too tall to see over. It's coming. Fast, and yet tonight in this village there's the still time. Time to sit under the stars. Time to feel the ground beneath your legs. Time to remember the world before permanence, before power, before paper. You close your eyes and breathe deep, because in the morning everything begins to change, and you are here to see it end. The stars are out in full now, strewn across the sky like beads from a broken necklace, and everything below them feels a little softer. The fires have burned low. The drum beats have stopped. The village has curled inward like a sleeping animal. You sit in the quiet, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them, listening not for anything in particular, but to the nothing that finally came after all that movement. It's rare, a stillness without tension. Not silence exactly, there's always a dog snoring somewhere, a baby fussing, a log crackling, but a shared pause, a collective exhale. 10,000 years ago. That's when all of this took place. And somehow it still feels like yesterday, or tomorrow. You've wandered across fields and hearths and rituals and mistakes. You've eaten bad barley beer and danced badly with strangers and buried people you didn't even know you'd miss until they were gone. And through all of it, you've watched humans do what humans always do. Adapt, complain, laugh, create, forget, and then remember again. You think about the child who pressed her palm into wet clay just because it felt right, the potter who carved her mark into a crooked jar, the dog who decided to stop running wild, the woman who told stories to hold her people together. None of them knew what was coming, what could come, that cities would rise, that we'd eventually measure time in hours instead of harvests, that we'd look back and call them prehistoric, as if they hadn't been making futures with every seed they planted. They weren't lost, or slow, or primitive. They were the warm-up act for everything. And you, lucky you, got to sit in the front row just before the curtain rose. So now, wherever you are, whatever city, whatever room, whatever tiny square of the world you call home, let this sink in. We've always been storytellers, always been builders, always been flawed, hilarious, hopeful animals trying to make sense of time. And you're just the latest echo in that chain. So rest well tonight, time traveller. Stretch your arms. Close your eyes. History will be here when you wake up.